Chapter 2038, The Romance 26. Chapter 2038, The Romance 26. But as soon as Feng Sun spoke, Emperor Wu threw a dirty look at him. Shut up. One more word and I'll punish you as well. Prime Minister Liu, who was seldom noticed, glanced at Feng Sun and shook his head. If His Majesty wanted to punish the girl, he must have his reasons. Because only after he punished her could he give her a job. It sounded unreasonable, but one could understand if one thought about it. But Feng Sun didn't have time to think. He couldn't let such a humiliating thing happen to Duan Chaoga. If he just stood there and watched, Xiaowu would never forgive him. Your Majesty, please stop this. Feng Sun knelt down and cupped his fists. I'll take Miss Chaoga's place. Emperor Wu was furious. He glared at Feng Sun. If you like being punished so much, you can have it. Bring me another bench. Feng Sun will be flogged twice as many times as Duan Chaoga. Spare no strength. Your Majesty. Lady Northern Feng paled. The spare no strength part was terrifying. The people doing the flogging were the most capable eunuchs in court. If the emperor told them to spare no strength, Feng Sun would suffer from internal injuries. Sorry about this. Two old eunuchs stepped out. There was no expression on their faces, and they gave everyone an oppressive feeling. Lady Northern Feng, please leave, Emperor Wu said coldly. Seeing this, Ranmil smirked. Princess, shall we go? Xiao Chao, Ranmil's personal maid, spoke gently as she took care of the wounds on Ranmil's face. They were already leaving, but Ranmil stopped when she saw what was going to happen. With her swollen face, she grimaced in pain even if she moved her mouth a little, but she still snorted. I'm not going anywhere. Why should I? His Majesty has my back now. Start. Emperor Wu gave the order. Whoosh. Two benches were set next to each other. Feng Sun and Chaoga lay on their stomachs. Two old eunuchs stood on one side each, and instead of wooden rods, they were holding rods made from iron. They were thick, long, and filled with spiritual essence. Chaoga almost fainted at the first hit. It really hurt. But many people were watching closely, as if they were going to recruit Chaoga, as soon as the flogging was over. Ranmil laughed. Sapphiro laughed. So did the older prince. And Chieftain Sinal. Use all your strength. This was the way Emperor Wu maintained his dignity as an emperor. Thump, thump, thump. Each time the iron rod fell, blood splashed. It was such a scary thing to watch. Chaoga felt that she was going to pass out. She gritted her teeth. If Xiaowu was here, Xiaowu would never let this happen to her. Just then she heard a click. The tightly shut bronze door slowly opened. Oh God! She's still alive. How's that possible? Chapter 2039, The Romance 27. Chapter 2039, The Romance 27. Everyone stared at the bronze door in amazement. There stood a teenage boy and a teenage girl, both beautiful and extraordinary. Together, they looked as wonderful as a picture. But no one was in the mood to be amazed now, because everyone was astonished to see who they were. Feng Wu. Isn't she dead? Doesn't the door only open once every 3 years? Ranmil sprang to her feet and watched in disbelief. How is this possible? She had to be seeing things. But their Feng Wu was very much alive. No matter how many times Ranmil rubbed her eyes, Feng Wu didn't disappear. To Ranmil's frustration, the crown prince of the empire was right next to Feng Wu. Moreover, wherever Feng Wu went, Jun Linyuan was half a step behind her, as if he was her most loyal protector. What a scene! Moreover, Ranmil also noticed something strange. She was the one who had pushed Feng Wu back into the tombs. And it was only reasonable that Feng Wu would go after her as soon as she came out. However, Feng Wu was giving off a cold air now, and she looked so unapproachable that one felt a chill even just looking at her. There were no emotions in those brooding eyes. Ranmil stared at Feng Wu. However, to Ranmil's frustration, no matter how hard she stared at Feng Wu, the latter only looked past her as if she didn't recognize her. She completely ignored Ranmil. That was even worse than hatred. Because hatred meant that she still cared. Feng Wu's indifference meant that she didn't care about Ranmil at all. Ranmil was already angry at Duan Chaoga. But now, Feng Wu's ignorance completely infuriated her. She wasn't the only one who noticed how cold Feng Wu looked. Many people saw it as well. Sapphira was a bit slow. Since she stood closer to Feng Wu, she mocked her. "Isn't it Feng Wu? I thought you died in the tombs. I didn't expect to see you come out alive." As soon as she said that, she noticed that Jun Linyuan gave her a glance. That made Sapphira's head go blank. The Feng Wu she was talking to used to have bright, pretty eyes, but now, they looked like the eyes of an eagle. One glance from Feng Wu, and Sapphira felt a chill run down her spine. Sapphira wanted to speak, but she forgot what she was going to say. Meanwhile, Jun Linyuan smirked and said, "I see that you've missed me." "What?" Sapphira immediately waved her hands. "Your Royal Highness, that's not what I mean. I was talking about Feng." Chapter 2040, The Romance 28. Chapter 2040, The Romance 28. Feng Wu looked around, and noticed in pleasant surprise that people would look away when their eyes met. They all feared her. She felt like she was back in the classroom in her previous life, when students wouldn't meet the teacher's eyes for fear that they might be picked out to answer questions. Switching bodies with Jun Linyuan didn't seem so bad now. As soon as she began to like her new identity, she saw a miserable scene. Chaoga. She and Feng Sun lay on their stomachs on two benches, and their lower backs were badly mutilated. Feng Wu felt something click in her head. Usually, she was an easygoing person, but she would never let people hurt her family. "Chao." Feng Wu walked toward Chaoga, but Jun Linyuan tugged at her. Feng Wu looked at him in confusion. Jun Linyuan said grimly, "Remember who you are now." Feng Wu didn't know what to say. She was so worried just then that she almost forgot that she was Jun Linyuan now. If she went to look at Chaoga in this body, Chaoga would probably freak out. Everyone was watching Feng Wu and Jun Linyuan. Maybe they didn't dare to stare at Jun Linyuan, but looking at Feng Wu was fine. Therefore, they saw something they didn't want to see. Were Feng Wu and the Crown Prince so close? They were murmuring to each other, and kept tugging back and forth. Ranmil almost couldn't contain her jealousy. Feng Wu couldn't care less about Ranmil's feelings. She looked at Chaoga, and saw that the latter was stunned. She couldn't understand why Jun Linyuan looked so concerned. Feng Wu cleared her throat. She didn't want people to think that there was something between Chaoga and Jun Linyuan. She then walked to Feng Sun and asked coldly, "What happened?" Feng Sun said, "His Majesty wanted to punish Chaoga, so I thought I should keep her company. Otherwise she would be so lonely." "Feng Sun, you must have been punished because he said the wrong thing." Feng Wu threw a dirty look at Feng Sun, and mimicked Jun Linyuan's tone. "Idiot." Feng Sun chuckled and scratched his head. "What a fool." Feng Wu felt a little guilty. Feng Sun looked surprised. Since when was the poker-faced boss Jun so compassionate? Did something happen in the tombs? Feng Sun said, "I'm so relieved that Xiao Wu came out with you. I wasn't so worried because you were inside. I didn't expect you to save her." "Teehee, that girl said that." Feng Wu frowned. "What did she say?" As she spoke, she reached into her sleeve to find some medicine for Feng Sun and Chaoga. But she didn't find anything, because it was carried by her original body. At that thought, Feng Wu reached out to Jun Linyuan. "What?" Jun Linyuan frowned at Feng Wu. "The blood-clotting pills," Feng Wu said. Jun Linyuan looked impatient, but he still took a small porcelain bottle out of his sleeve and tossed it at Feng Wu. Chapter 2041, The Romance 29. Chapter 2041, The Romance 29. Feng Wu happily took the medicine and was about to give it to Feng Sun. But Feng Sun looked at her in amazement. So did everyone else around them. What? Were they seeing things? The Crown Prince had just smiled at Feng Wu and asked her for something. But Feng Wu couldn't be bothered to talk to him, and even impatiently threw something at His Royal Highness. That was outrageous. The girls who secretly had a crush on Jun Linyuan couldn't accept it, especially Ranmil. Her face had drained of all color, and she was frozen on the spot, as if she had been struck by lightning. No, something was wrong. She couldn't believe her eyes. Next to her, Xiaoqiao was perplexed. Your Highness, doesn't Miss Fengwu like His Royal Highness? Why is she so arrogant? Ranmil didn't know what to say. So the others had seen it as well. It hadn't been an illusion. As for the others, no one dared to discuss the crown prince in front of him, but they still found it odd. Why was Fengwu so arrogant? Since walking out of the bronze door, she had kept her hands behind her back, as if she was inspecting her territory. She seemed to treat the rest of the crowd as ants. And she was so impatient with the crown prince. How could she do it? They all felt so indignant on the crown prince's behalf. To their frustration, the crown prince smiled at Fengwu. Had he smiled? Was he infatuated with Fengwu? Fengwu also noticed the strange look in everyone's eyes, so she gave the medicine to Xian Yi and Xiuling. Xian Yi could treat Feng Sun, and Xiuling would take care of Chaoga. As for herself, she turned her head and saw the person next to her, who was behaving like the most capable man in the world. She nudged Jun Linyuan, hoping that he could change his demeanor. Jun Linyuan ignored her, and turned to stare at Emperor Wu. Emperor Wu was infuriated by the look in Jun Linyuan's eyes. He gave the order to punish them, and they had only been flogged less than 20 times. He could understand if Jun Linyuan glared at him, but Fengwu was the one glaring at him now. Crossing his hands behind his back, Jun Linyuan stared at Emperor Wu with cold eyes. Emperor Wu almost fainted. The look Fengwu gave him made him feel like a fatuous ruler. Fengwu was as bold as Jun Linyuan now. What? Do you have something to say? Emperor Wu walked toward her. Jun Linyuan asked coldly, why did you punish them? Emperor Wu was so angry that he almost laughed. How dare this girl question him? How dare you defy your emperor like this? Take her down. Emperor Wu pointed at Fengwu. How dare you? The crown prince said coldly. Emperor Wu saw the familiar fierce look in her eyes. His heart skipped a beat. That look reminded him so much of Jun Linyuan. The crowd was astonished as well. How bold was Fengwu now? How could she speak to the emperor like that? He was Emperor Wu. Seeing this, Fengwu almost had a nervous breakdown. Chapter 2042, The Romance 30. Chapter 2042, The Romance 30. Fengwu wanted to scream. She immediately grabbed Jun Linyuan's hand and stared at him. The crown prince ignored her and brushed off her hand. The crowd couldn't believe what they saw. What? What did they just see? Fengwu just brushed His Royal Highness's hand away. How dare she? They all looked at one another and talked among themselves. Ranmil and Sapphira were already flushed with anger. But Ranmil was better at controlling her rage. How dare she? Who does she think she is? Sapphira and Ranmil were in the same boat now. Ranmil clenched her fists, and blue veins popped on her forehead. Emperor Wu was astonished. Since when did his defiant and arrogant son become so relenting? The Jun Linyuan he knew would definitely lose his temper. Fengwu was doomed. Emperor Wu wasn't the only one who thought that way. The others also believed that was what was going to happen. However, the crown prince let Fengwu push him away without protesting. Instead, he moved closer to her. What the hell? Had this world gone insane? Jun Linyuan's internal injury flared up after he pushed Fengwu away, and he started coughing. He coughed so hard that his cheeks flushed. Fengwu was worried. That was her body. So she immediately moved closer and lowered her voice. How's my body? Is it serious? I thought you repaired it. Jun Linyuan glanced at Fengwu, stopped coughing, and said coldly, the magic soul vine feeds on blood, and your body is badly damaged. How am I supposed to repair it so soon? Not even you? Fengwu eyed Jun Linyuan eagerly. Jun Linyuan said, your body is too weak. Fengwu said awkwardly, you're going to repair it, right? Jun Linyuan threw a dirty look at Fengwu and wouldn't speak. Seeing their heads getting closer and closer, Emperor Wu was furious. Jun Linyuan, you, come over here. Emperor Wu bellowed. Jun Linyuan followed. Emperor Wu glared at Jun Linyuan. Why did you bring that annoying girl here? That annoying girl? The crown prince didn't like the sound of that. His face darkened, and there was a cold look in his eyes. Emperor Wu was speechless. Did this Feng Wu think that she had married into the royal family already? Where did this arrogance come from? Feng Wu cleared her throat. She took Jun Linyuan's hand and whispered, "Don't be angry. Your body is too weak to get angry. Please calm down. You're going to get me killed." Jun Linyuan snorted. But Feng Wu did have a point, so Jun Linyuan changed his demeanor. After appeasing Jun Linyuan, Feng Wu walked to Emperor Wu's side. Emperor Wu glared at Feng Wu and asked, "Jun Linyuan, what do you think you're doing?" Feng Wu looked perplexed. Emperor Wu asked, "What are you doing with that Feng Wu?" Feng Wu said, "What?" Emperor Wu was furious. "Stop pretending. Don't think you can do whatever you want just because you're more capable than I am. Do you really want to marry her?" Chapter 2043 His Royal Highness 1. Chapter 2043 His Royal Highness 1. Feng Wu opened her eyes in astonishment. "What? Marry her?" Emperor Wu stared at Feng Wu in frustration. "Yes, she's a pretty girl. And you probably won't find more than a handful of girls who are prettier. But you don't have to do this. Do you really need to indulge her like this? She can be one of your royal concubines at most. Remember this. We've already chosen a wife for you. Keep that in mind." Emperor Wu scolded Jun Linyuan. When telling his son off, Emperor Wu didn't sound so different from other fathers. Feng Wu then heard a beep in her head. "You have 5 minutes until the 8th trial expires. I repeat, you have 5 minutes until the 8th trial expires." That was Peach Blossom Fairy? Feng Wu called for the fairy in her head. "Yes," the fairy said timidly. Feng Wu asked, "Can you talk now?" The fairy said, "I may get caught, but I'm a kind person, so I have to deliver this message to you. You only have 5 minutes left, so hurry up. I'm off." "Hey you," Feng Wu called in her head. The fairy left quickly, and no matter how many times Feng Wu tried to summon her, she wouldn't show up again. That was how scary she found Jun Linyuan. 5 minutes. The 8th trial frustrated Feng Wu, because the requirement was that Jun Linyuan had to officially acknowledge their marriage contract. Feng Wu looked at Jun Linyuan a few steps away. Sapphiro and Ranmil were saying something to him. By the looks of it, they were saying bad things behind her back. In fact, the two princesses were provoking Feng Wu. Sapphiro did most of the talking. She stared at Feng Wu and asked, "Who do you think you are?" Poor Sapphiro. She had no idea that she wasn't talking to the real Feng Wu. Instead, it was Jun Linyuan, whom she had a crush on. The crown prince had a short temper, so he frowned at Sapphiro. Sapphiro smirked. "You're not that good at all. You were a level 7 spiritual elder before you went in, and you're still a level 7 spiritual elder now. Did you know? Your two minions, Duan Chaoga and Qiuling, made some great progress. Duan Chaoga is a level 8 spiritual elder now, and even your little one is a level 6 spiritual elder now. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? Who gave you the courage to push His Royal Highness? He can kill you for that." The frown on Jun Linyuan's face grew bigger. Seeing this, Sapphiro snorted. "Guess what? My father decided to let the two of us go to the Junhua Empire with him this time. Your emperor said that we can choose any man in the Junhua Empire to be our husband. My sister and I have made up our minds. His Royal Highness is the only one we want." Jun Linyuan glanced at Sapphiro. "But there's only one crown prince, and there are two of us. So, we're going to marry the same husband." Chapter 2044 His Royal Highness 2. Chapter 2044 His Royal Highness 2. Since we want this marriage so much, we don't expect to be official wives, but we'll definitely be the most senior royal consorts. Did you hear me? The most senior ones. You're not getting that title. Sapphiro bragged in front of Feng Wu and raised her chin. "And you'll be nothing but a bed-warming maid. Haha, you'll see." After that, Sapphiro turned to leave. Once she and Ranmil were gone. "Moron." The crown prince spoke for the first time. Feng Wu could read lips. From her angle, she could see exactly what Sapphiro had said. She felt so embarrassed for the girl. Oh dear. If Sapphiro knew that she hadn't been talking to Feng Wu, but the crown prince himself, she would probably be scared to death. Feng Wu genuinely felt sorry for Sapphiro. Jun Linyuan, are you listening to me? Feng Wu heard Emperor Wu growl. The officials were used to the way Emperor Wu and Jun Linyuan interacted with each other, so they weren't surprised. Huh? What? Feng Wu was so focused on reading Jun Linyuan's lips that she didn't hear what Emperor Wu said. What was more, her time to finish the 8th trial was running out, and all she could think about was how to make Jun Linyuan help her do it. She grew anxious. Emperor Wu asked, "Do you really want to marry her?" He was shouting so loudly that it made Feng Wu's ears ring. Wait, her eyes lit up. The 8th trial required Jun Linyuan to acknowledge their marriage contract in front of everyone. And she was Jun Linyuan now. In that case, if she made the announcement, would that count? Jun Linyuan, answer me. Emperor Wu was going to explode. Feng Wu clenched her fists and gritted her teeth. My marriage contract with Feng Wu was never annulled. Father, did you forget that? At those words, a hush fell over the crowd. They could hear the sound of leaves falling to the ground, because no one dared to breathe. If they had been surprised by the interaction between Feng Wu and the crown prince, what they just heard could make their hearts stop. The marriage contract was still in place. Hadn't it been cancelled? How could they still be engaged? But the crown prince had said it himself. It had to be true. Sapphiro and Ranmil had just threatened Feng Wu, and they couldn't believe their ears. That was impossible. They screamed in their heads. All eyes were on Emperor Wu. They were all waiting for his reply. Emperor Wu was dumbfounded. In fact, he didn't know if the marriage arrangement had been successfully cancelled or not. For Jun Linyuan had handled it himself despite his young age. Afterward, he wouldn't say a word about it, so Emperor Wu had stopped asking. He had been convinced that his son would give up on the crippled girl. Why wouldn't he? Chapter 2045, His Royal Highness 3. Chapter 2045, His Royal Highness 3. Emperor Wu looked like he had been struck by lightning. Feng Wu paid no attention to either Jun Linyuan or Emperor Wu. Right now she was completely inside her head. She had just said the words needed for the 8th trial. Although it was an embarrassing thing to say, to get her beautiful master back, she would do anything. She waited nervously for the beeping sound. Her heart raced. Faster. She only had 5 minutes, and half of that time had already passed. She couldn't afford any delay now. However, no matter how long she waited, she didn't hear that sound. The only thing she heard was the fairy's voice. Gosh, little master, are you an idiot? The fairy communicated with Feng Wu again, despite the danger. Feng Wu looked perplexed. The fairy said, "Who are you?" Feng Wu said, "I'm Feng Wu." The fairy said, "Am I talking to you or His Royal Highness?" Feng Wu said, "Me, of course." The fairy said, "There you have it. Can you repeat what the 8th trial is then?" Feng Wu said, "Jun Linyuan needs to acknowledge our marriage contract in front of everyone." The fairy said, "That's right. Jun Linyuan has to acknowledge it. Are you him?" Feng Wu said, "Well," the fairy said in a hurry, "your time is almost up. I'm off." With a whoosh, the fairy disappeared again. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. She scratched her head. At first, she thought that she could use this body to finish the 8th trial. There would only be 4 trials left after that. How sweet. But there was no free lunch in the world. Feng Wu eyed Jun Linyuan eagerly. Jun Linyuan was looking at her as well. He waved at her. Feng Wu ran happily toward him. The crowd closed their eyes. The crown prince was running happily toward Feng Wu. They couldn't bring themselves to look. Feng Wu's thoughts spun as she ran toward Jun Linyuan. What should she do to make Jun Linyuan admitted in front of everyone? Feng Wu ran to Jun Linyuan, stood still, and took a deep breath. She got straight to the point. "Tell me, does our marriage agreement still stand?" As she spoke, she took out her half of the dark jade. It was said that this was the token of the marriage agreement. Feng Wu dangled the pendant in front of Jun Linyuan and asked, "Do you have the other half?" In fact, Feng Wu knew that he did. Because she was Jun Linyuan now, and she knew that she had Jun Lingyuan's half. She had found it when she had taken inventory of Jun Lingyuan's belongings just then. Jun Lingyuan kept his unblinking gaze on Feng Wu. There was an indescribable expression in his eyes. His eyes were like bottomless pits. No one could meet such a gaze. But Feng Wu wasn't just anyone. She needed to bring her beautiful master back. She had to finish this trial. Chapter 2046, His Royal Highness 4. Chapter 2046, His Royal Highness 4. Everyone looked at Feng Wu. Seeing that Feng Wu kept staring at the crown prince and didn't take out the token, they felt there was some hope. Had Feng Wu lost her half? She must have. Jun Lingyuan glanced at Feng Wu. Do you really want to marry me so badly? Wretch. If someone was drinking water now, they would spit it out. Feng Wu must have lost her mind to talk to the crown prince like that. Feng Wu looked at Jun Lingyuan and said calmly, I just want to make sure that we both have our tokens. If the marriage agreement isn't valid, we can move on with our lives. Right? Jun Lingyuan gave her a half-smile. Be honest. Feng Wu said, I am. The crown prince mocked her. You've known all along that I have it, and you're making me admit it in front of everyone. You must be doing it on purpose. Feng Wu blushed. Jun Lingyuan was so clever. The crowd was speechless. How could the crown prince let Feng Wu talk to him like that? How did Feng Wu do it? Ding! Feng Wu finally heard the beep she had been waiting for. Congratulations. You finished the 8th trial. Phew. Feng Wu let out a breath of relief. Finally. There were only 4 trials left now. After she finished them, she could get another broken star piece. And her beautiful master would wake up. And it wouldn't be for just 3 days. The thought of her beautiful master waking up filled Feng Wu with motivation and hope. But Feng Wu suddenly realized something serious. She and Jun Lingyuan were actually still engaged. The engagement hadn't been annulled. Feng Wu heard a rumble in her ears. That was crazy. She and Jun Lingyuan were engaged. I won't have it. Feng Wu was still trying to figure out how to make the engagement go away when she heard a familiar voice. Feng Wu looked up and saw the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager was hurrying toward them, supported by Granny Lan. Despite her old age, she was very fast. Feng Wu saw that the Empress Dowager was doing much better now. The Empress Dowager wore a black brocade robe, and her face was darker than a cloudy sky. Grandma. Although the Crown Prince and Emperor Wu couldn't wait to quarrel with each other, both loved the Empress Dowager. Therefore, even someone as arrogant as Jun Lingyuan greeted the old lady. But he was Feng Wu now, and the Empress Dowager didn't like Feng Wu at all. So her face immediately darkened, and she threw a dirty look at Feng Wu. Jun Lingyuan was speechless. Turning around, the Empress Dowager took Feng Wu's hand and said, Jun, I was so worried. Were you hurt? How do you feel now? Do you have a headache? Feng Wu glanced at Jun Lingyuan. Jun Lingyuan crossed his hands behind his back and looked up at the sky. Feng Wu smiled to herself, but didn't let anything show. She shook her head at the Empress Dowager. I'm fine. The old lady pressed. Are you sure? Feng Wu said. Yes, I'm perfectly fine. The Empress Dowager patted Feng Wu's head. You don't sound so good. Chapter 2047, His Royal Highness 5. Chapter 2047, His Royal Highness 5. The Empress Dowager patted Feng Wu's head. You don't sound so good. Feng Wu rubbed her head and chuckled. The old lady didn't like her at all, but now that she was Jun Lingyuan, the old lady couldn't show her enough love. The Empress Dowager had turned around already, but she suddenly turned back. Recalling who she was now, Feng Wu immediately put on a deadpan face. The old lady didn't suspect anything. Feng Wu told herself that in her head. She had to be careful. She would be in a lot of trouble if the others noticed. And that wasn't all of it. With Jun Lingyuan's temper, he must have made a lot of enemies. If they realized that she was actually him now, would they take the chance to kill him? If she was them, she would definitely do it. Therefore, Feng Wu took a deep breath and looked as Jun Lingyuan-like as possible. Meanwhile, The Empress Dowager had already reached Jun Linyuan, aka Feng Wu. Her face darkened, and she looked very displeased. "Show me the jade pendant." She reached out to Feng Wu. Jun Linyuan respected the Empress Dowager, so of course he gave it to her. Hence, he handed the pendant to the Empress Dowager. She examined the pendant closely before putting it in her sleeve. Jun Linyuan looked at the Empress Dowager with a brooding expression in his eyes. "We'll talk about the engagement after we go back to the imperial capital," said the Empress Dowager, waving her hands. Jun Linyuan's face darkened. Was the Empress Dowager going to annul the engagement? Seeing this, the Empress Dowager was displeased and she smirked. "What? Are you upset?" Jun Linyuan stared at the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager snorted. "How dare you? You're just a common girl." Feng Wu was about to run to them, when she recalled that she was Jun Linyuan now. So, she put her hands behind her back like Jun Linyuan did, and strolled toward them. Feng Wu knew that Jun Linyuan hadn't forgotten that he should be playing her, but he was too proud to do it. Therefore, she glanced at Jun Linyuan and said, "Hey little Feng Wu, how could you upset the Empress Dowager?" The Crown Prince turned to stare at Feng Wu. This girl was enjoying this. Feng Wu winked at Jun Linyuan, telling him to stay put. Jun Linyuan smirked. Feng Wu raised her chin and glanced at Jun Linyuan. "Since when can a common girl sneer at me? Apologize to Her Majesty now." Jun Linyuan narrowed his eyes and gave Feng Wu a warning look. She was pushing the limit. There was a flicker in her eyes. She was taking the opportunity to tease him. Seeing that her grandson was on her side, the Empress Dowager was elated. The Empress Dowager gave Feng Wu an arrogant look before turning to the real Feng Wu. "Junjun, if you want to take this girl with you, you need to train her first." Chapter 2048, His Royal Highness 6. Chapter 2048, His Royal Highness 6. Feng Wu held the Empress Dowager's hand and nodded. "Yes, of course. I'll train her well." The Empress Dowager said, "Are you going to marry such a girl? You should cancel the marriage contract." Feng Wu chuckled inwardly but said obediently, "Yes, of course. I'll do that later." The Empress Dowager caressed Feng Wu's hand and smiled. "Good boy. I'm so happy to hear that. I'll find you a nice girl. Don't worry. I already have an eye on someone." Feng Wu knew whom she was referring to. "Grandma." Feng Wu changed the subject. She pointed at Feng Sun and said, "What's with all the flogging?" The Empress Dowager nodded and told Emperor Wu, "Your Majesty, it's a good thing that they all made it out alive. They all look exhausted. Let them go back and have some rest. We've been here for so long. I think we should head back tomorrow." Emperor Wu always listened to his mother. Since the Empress Dowager had said so, he nodded and said, "All right, we'll set out tomorrow." The Junhua Empire team had gained a lot from the event this time. Most of the younger generation had risen 2 or 3 levels, and the death rate was very low. The grassland was the unlucky side. Not only had Ranmil lost her cultivation, the other members hadn't improved much either. Chieftain Sino laughed. "If your Majesty has decided to leave tomorrow, I'd like to invite you to a farewell banquet tonight." Emperor Wu wouldn't say no to that. "I understand." They all dispersed and went back to their tents. Jun Linyuan stared at Feng Wu. "You, get over here." After that, he led Feng Wu into his tent. Granny Gong and Feng looked at each other in bewilderment. They looked at each other and felt that something wasn't right. But what was it? Feng watched Feng Wu's gait and frowned. "Is there something wrong?" Granny Gong frowned and asked. Feng said, "Let's wait and see." Chaoga and Qiuling had a lot of things to tell Feng Wu, but they were both confused when they saw her going into the Crown Prince's tent. Just then, were they seeing things? Did Feng Wu just command the Crown Prince? Since when was she so bold? They couldn't understand it. "Something's not right," said someone behind them. "Feng Sun." Chaoga stared at him. Although they had just been flogged, Feng Wu's medicine was so effective that they could already limp around. "Do you find it strange too?" Chaoga stared at Feng Sun. Feng Sun rubbed his chin. "Of course it's strange. Boss Jun is so protective of Xiao Wu. He was never like that." This isn't good. Chao asked, why? Isn't it good? Feng Sun said, but Xiao Wu specifically told me that Boss Jun isn't the one she likes. Boss Jun will be so disappointed. Chao asked, what do you want to do? Feng Sun said, I won't be a good friend if I don't tell him anything. Chao said, Feng Sun, I'm warning you, stay out of their business. You'll only create more trouble. Feng Sun looked at Chao, but didn't say anything. Chapter 2049, His Royal Highness 7. Chapter 2049, His Royal Highness 7. Chao glared at him. Promise me that you won't interfere. Feng Sun scratched his head. He didn't want to, but he couldn't live with his conscience. Back in the tent, Jun Linyuan stared at Feng Wu and asked coldly, are you happy now? Feng Wu looked at him innocently. What are you talking about? Jun Linyuan snorted. Kneel down and apologize to Her Majesty. Feng Wu chuckled, but she put on a straight face when she saw the way Jun Linyuan stared at her. However, she couldn't hide the smile in her eyes. Crossing his hands behind his back, Jun Linyuan glanced at Feng Wu and said, you're not allowed to leave my side. Feng Wu was about to retort, when she heard something at that moment. Ding! The 9th trial had started. Got it. Jun Linyuan glared at Feng Wu. However, the voice didn't tell her what the task was. She then remembered something. Was it because the fairy was still with Jun Linyuan? Was that why she hadn't come out to announce the task yet? Hence, Feng Wu showed her palm to Jun Linyuan. The crown prince frowned. What? Feng Wu chuckled. There's a little thing in me. Can I have it back, please? Jun Linyuan frowned. Don't smile like that with my face. Feng Wu nodded and straightened her face. Jun Linyuan, please give it back to me now. She then gave a bow. The crown prince couldn't stand seeing himself behave that way. So he took the fairy out and tossed it to Feng Wu. Feng Wu was delighted to have the fairy back. 9th trial. After the fairy woke up, she immediately climbed into Feng Wu's chest pocket and communicated with Feng Wu in her mind. Feng Wu said, tell me now. The fairy said, you have to stay by Jun Linyuan's side all the time for a month. What? Feng Wu drew in her breath. A month? That's so long. Wasn't there already a similar task before? The fairy cleared her throat. Well, you didn't switch bodies then, so that doesn't count. Feng Wu said, fine, that doesn't count then. Tell me now. What do you mean by stay by his side all the time? How am I supposed to do that? The fairy cleared her throat. Don't be so serious. We can loosen the restriction a little. Feng Wu asked, for instance. The fairy said, for instance, you can stay within 5 steps of him. Feng Wu said, 5 steps? How's that possible? The fairy said, 10 steps then. That's the best I can do. Feng Wu said, no. However, before Feng Wu could say another word, the fairy disappeared. Before she left, she said in Feng Wu's mind, it's a deal then. The trial starts now. Feng Wu looked frustrated. She didn't agree to this. Feng Wu, are you listening to me? After the conversation was over, Feng Wu saw Jun Linyuan's dark face. She asked, what? What was that? Frustrated, the crown prince turned to leave. Stop right there. Feng Wu stared at Jun Linyuan and shouted. Jun Linyuan stopped and stared at Feng Wu. That was bold. The girl dared to yell at him now. Chapter 2050, His Royal Highness 8. Chapter 2050, His Royal Highness 8. Seeing that the crown prince was displeased, Feng Wu immediately put on a smile. Well, we can talk about it, right? There's no need to get angry. What did you say? I should stay by your side. Right. Great. Feng Wu smacked the table. How about we play a game? Jun Linyuan raised his eyebrows and stared at Feng Wu in bewilderment. Feng Wu was crying inwardly, but she still put on a happy face. Let's play a game where I have to stay with you all the time. Jun Linyuan gave her another confused look. Feng Wu cleared her throat. She didn't know how to bring it up, but she had already reached the 9th trial, and she couldn't give up now. Otherwise, all her efforts so far would be wasted. At that thought, Feng Wu gritted her teeth and said, it's a really interesting game. We will stay by each other's side for a month, and neither one can walk away from the other during this time. How's that? Feng Wu stared nervously at Jun Linyuan. Well, I don't mean it literally. We can be 10 steps from each other. How does that sound? It'll be fun. Jun Linyuan looked at Feng Wu with his brooding eyes, and the emotion in them was quite indescribable. Feng Wu's heart raced. What if Jun Linyuan said no? The chance of that happening was very high. Feng Wu knew that if it were her, she would definitely say no. Why would a man and a woman stay with each other all the time for a month? Therefore, she bit her lower lip and looked nervously at Jun Linyuan. The crown prince only glanced at Feng Wu before he turned to leave. Feng Wu grew uneasy. That lousy fairy. How could she start the trial so quickly? She didn't give Feng Wu any time to prepare at all. What if Jun Linyuan walked 10 steps away by accident? Hence, she immediately followed Jun Linyuan. Jun Linyuan stopped and grinned at Feng Wu. Do you really like me that much? Feng Wu looked perplexed. Jun Linyuan said, that's a lousy excuse. Feng Wu said, well. Crossing his hands behind him, Jun Linyuan glanced at Feng Wu. Do you think I should give you the chance? Feng Wu asked, what chance? Jun Linyuan said, stop pretending. Don't you think that you're overdoing it? Feng Wu said, well. Jun Linyuan said, since you're not all that sincere, my answer is, no, you can't. Jun Linyuan turned to leave after that. And he counted in his head. 10, 9, 8, 7. He believed that Feng Wu loved him too much not to stop him. When he counted to 5. Your Royal Highness. Feng Wu caught up with him and held his hand. Let's talk. Why are you in such a rush? Come. Sit here with me. And there it was. The crown prince smiled a little. What do you want to talk about? He put on a serious and arrogant face. Feng Wu vented her sarcasm inwardly. Once she finished the trials, she would never talk to him again. I see that someone's angry, said the crown prince with a half-smile. Feng Wu immediately forced a smile. She then quickly poured Jun Linyuan some tea and said, Your Royal Highness, here, have some tea. Chapter 2051, His Royal Highness 9. Chapter 2051, His Royal Highness 9. Holding the teacup, Jun Linyuan glanced at Feng Wu. Boss Jun, there's nothing wrong with this game, right? We can use it to train our resilience and tolerance. Don't you think so? A month isn't long at all. It'll be over before you know it. Feng Wu smiled and tried to persuade Jun Linyuan. I think I didn't sleep well. My shoulders ache. The crown prince stretched. That couldn't be any more obvious. Feng Wu was too smart not to catch it. So, she quickly ran up to Jun Linyuan and massaged his shoulders. She was an expert medicine refiner, and not many people could find acupoints as accurately as she could. Her massage was very comfortable. I feel so sleepy. Jun Linyuan rose to his feet and walked to the bed. Feng Wu immediately followed him, for she had to stay within 10 steps of him. The crown prince smiled in satisfaction. Feng Wu couldn't look any more frustrated. While Jun Linyuan went to sleep, Feng Wu had to sit by the bed. Jun Linyuan mumbled, If I'm happy enough, maybe I'll give you the chance. Feng Wu asked, What chance? The crown prince snorted. Feng Wu, there's no point in pretending anymore. Feng Wu asked, What? The crown prince smirked. If you make me happy, I'll give you the chance to like me. Feng Wu was screaming inwardly. Give me the chance to like you? Go to hell. But she didn't say anything. She needed his help, so she had to do what he wanted. She forced a smile. Really? Jun Linyuan said, Yes. I'll give you the honor of being in my presence. Feng Wu snorted inwardly. She didn't want it at all. But she still had to smile. Thank you, Your Royal Highness. The crown prince asked. Why are you thanking me? Have I promised you anything? Feng Wu didn't know what to say. Feng Wu wanted to punch Jun Linyuan when she saw how much he was enjoying this. Jun Linyuan snorted. Don't stop. Feng Wu sighed. All right. Poor Feng Wu. Since she needed Jun Linyuan's help now, she couldn't say no, and had to keep giving him a massage. And Jun Linyuan didn't wake up until that night. Someone knocked on the door. Feng Wu looked at the distance between the door and the bed. It was over 10 steps, so Feng Wu wasn't going to answer it. Boss Jun, it's me. It was Feng Sun's voice. Come in. With a flick of Feng Wu's fingers, the door opened. Don't stop. The half-asleep Jun Linyuan reminded Feng Wu. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. Feng Sun was almost scared to death when he walked into the room. Feng Wu was lying on the bed facing away from the door, while Boss Jun was sitting by the bed and giving Feng Wu a leg massage. He was giving Feng Wu a leg massage. Feng Sun's eyes widened. He stared at Feng Wu in disbelief. Boss Jun, you. Feng Wu gestured at him. Shhhh. Be quiet. Feng Sun couldn't stand it anymore. Chapter 2052. His Royal Highness 10. Chapter 2052. His Royal Highness 10. He had convinced himself that he would forget what Feng Wu had told him before. But seeing what Boss Jun was doing to himself, Feng Sun couldn't remain silent anymore. So he walked up to Jun Linyuan and dragged him away. Feng Wu wasn't used to Jun Linyuan's spiritual essence yet, and didn't dare use it freely. So Feng Sun was able to drag her a few steps away. She was almost 10 steps away from Jun Linyuan, and she was alarmed. Stop, she glared at Feng Sun. Pull yourself together. What are you doing? You look like the world is going to end. Feng Sun was frustrated by those words. Boss Jun, I can't bring myself to see you like this. Feng Sun stared at him. I just can't. Feng Wu asked, You can't? Feng Sun said. Boss Jun, you're forcing yourself to do this. It's not like you. Feng Wu was confused. Glancing at Feng Wu on the bed, Feng Sun took Jun Linyuan by the arm. Let's talk outside. Feng Wu realized that Feng Sun didn't want the other Feng Wu to hear what he was going to say. Feng Wu wanted to go outside, but she couldn't walk beyond that 10-step distance. Thus, she could only look at Feng Sun in resignation and say, We can talk here. Feng Sun pointed at Feng Wu on the bed. Feng Wu said, She's asleep. Don't worry. Feng Sun said, All right. I need to tell you something. Feng Wu said, Do tell. Feng Sun hesitated, then gave Feng Wu an apologetic look. He then turned to Feng Wu and said slowly, Boss Jun, you should be worried because Xiao Wu. Feng Wu was very curious. It seemed that Feng Sun was going to tell Jun Linyuan something behind her back. She was curious about what he was going to say. She didn't think that she had done anything worth blaming her for. Moreover, she knew that Jun Linyuan was awake right now. At that thought, she crossed her arms and said calmly, Tell me, what about Feng Wu? What did she do? Feng Sun scratched his head. She didn't actually do anything. It's just that she told me herself that she doesn't like you. She's in love with someone else. Feng Wu glared at Feng Sun. He really was going to talk behind her back. But what he didn't know was that the Boss Jun he was talking to was actually Feng Wu. Feng Wu snorted and stared at Feng Sun. Do you think I care about that? Feng Sun was confused. Boss Jun liked Feng Wu so much. Why should he care about that? On second thought, he realized how proud Boss Jun was. So be it. Right at that moment, there was a loud thump. They heard a noise from the bed. Feng Sun looked up and met Jun Linyuan's eyes. Holy crap! Those eyes! Feng Sun looked like he was about to cry when he turned to Boss Jun. Didn't you say that Xiao Wu was asleep? She's going to kill me. He ran off after that. Feng Wu scratched her head and murmured, Why is Feng Sun so afraid? He didn't say anything important. She then turned around and sat by the bed next to Jun Linyuan. Chapter 2053. His Royal Highness 11. Chapter 2053. His Royal Highness 11. She was about to ask him about the game, when she saw his dark face. There was no warmth in his eyes. Feng Wu felt her heart freeze. A chill ran down her spine. What's wrong? She realized that her voice was shaking. Jun Linyuan didn't say anything as he kept staring at her. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Feng Wu felt like crying. Her body was only that of a level 7 spiritual elder, and according to Jun Linyuan, it was severely injured. How could he radiate such intimidating energy? and his cheeks were scarlet red. Feng Wu wanted to speak, but she realized that she had upset him. Jun Linyuan you. Feng Wu started to say something. Cough cough. Jun Linyuan was caught in a fit of coughing and couldn't stop. Feng Wu immediately walked up to him and gently patted his back. She didn't realize how concerned she looked now. Jun Linyuan, what's wrong? Why are you so angry? Please don't be mad. However, her words only made Jun Linyuan cough even harder. He pushed Feng Wu away. But he didn't have much strength, and Feng Wu quickly walked back to his side. Out! Blood oozed out of the corner of his mouth as he stared at Feng Wu. Feng Wu said, "Why are you so angry? What's wrong with you?" Jun Linyuan said, "Get out! Now!" He pointed at the door and glared at Feng Wu with his eagle-like eyes. Feng Wu was confused. She didn't understand what had happened, but she couldn't go out now. Feng Wu fell back until she was 10 steps away from him. However, she felt that Jun Linyuan might roll to the other side of the bed, so she took a step forward. She sat down on the ground and spoke to Jun Linyuan in a serious tone. "I don't know why you're angry, but I know that it must have something to do with me. I'm not going anywhere. I'll sit right here." Jun Linyuan gritted his teeth and glared at Feng Wu. Feng Wu threw her hands up in the air. I'll just sit here and reflect on myself. I'll try to figure out why you're angry. Is that okay? Please don't make me go away." The look on Feng Wu's face was so adorable that Jun Linyuan snorted and turned his back to her. Out of sight, out of mind. Feng Wu secretly rejoiced. Luckily, she had expected the possibility that he would roll away from her, and had taken a step forward. Otherwise, she would have failed the task by now. At that thought, Feng Wu became a little worried. Although it was an unreasonable task, it had started, and Feng Wu would finish it at all costs. The problem now was that measuring the distance with her steps wasn't accurate enough. What if something went wrong? Feng Wu couldn't afford that mistake. So the best way was a rope. She could find a rope and tie herself to Jun Linyuan. That way, as long as the rope wasn't removed, they would always be within 10 steps of each other. Yes, that was it. But to do that, Jun Linyuan had to agree to play that game with her. At that thought, Feng Wu was filled with complaints toward Feng Sun. Chapter 2054, His Royal Highness 12. Chapter 2054, His Royal Highness 12. If Feng Sun hadn't intervened, Feng Wu knew that she would have coaxed Jun Linyuan into playing the game by now. But why was Jun Linyuan so angry? Sitting cross-legged on the ground, Feng Wu rested her chin on her right hand and was deep in thought. Jun Linyuan had clearly gotten angry after Feng Sun showed up. What did Feng Sun do? Nothing really. He only said one thing. He said that Feng Wu was in love with someone else. Was it possible that Jun Linyuan was angry because of that? Why should he be? If Jun Linyuan was really angry because of what Feng Sun said, it meant that he wanted Feng Wu to like him. The thought made Feng Wu jump to her feet. She wanted to question Jun Linyuan, but on second thought, she felt that even if Jun Linyuan wanted her to like him, it still wouldn't prove anything. People like Jun Linyuan were all very possessive. Everyone had to like him, regardless if he liked them or not. At that thought, Feng Wu pouted and stared at Jun Linyuan. The look in Jun Linyuan's eyes was still very cold. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. She didn't want to indulge him, but she still needed his help. But now, knock knock knock. Someone knocked on the door. Feng Wu's stomach lurched. Feng Sun hadn't come back, had he? She asked, "Who is it?" Granny Gong's voice rang out. "Your Royal Highness, the farewell banquet held by the chieftain is going to start soon. His Majesty has sent Master Gao to invite you." A farewell banquet? Jun Linyuan wasn't the type of person to attend such an event. "I'll decline the invitation if your Royal Highness doesn't want to go." Master Gao was on Jun Linyuan's side, and always wanted what was best for him. From what he knew about the Crown Prince, the latter wouldn't be interested in such a banquet at all. Granny Gong thought the same. So did Feng Wu. She then said, "Tonight I..." However, Jun Linyuan sat up before Feng Wu could finish. Feng Wu looked at him in confusion. Jun Linyuan walked past her without giving her a glance. He walked past Feng Wu in an arrogant manner. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. She couldn't calm down when she thought about the 9th trial. Without thinking, she followed Jun Linyuan and walked 3 steps behind him. They were very close. They walked out of the tent and Jun Linyuan suddenly stopped. He then turned to stare at Feng Wu. Feng Wu gave him an innocent look. Jun Linyuan said, "Don't follow me." He then quickly walked away. Feng Wu was exasperated. The 9th trial. She followed him without saying a word. Jun Linyuan walked faster and faster, until he looked like he was flying. Feng Wu was right behind him, fearing that she would break the 10-step rule. She was determined that Jun Linyuan had to play that game with her, and she had to tie herself to Jun Linyuan. Otherwise, it would be too dangerous. "Can't you understand what I said?" Jun Linyuan halted, turned around, and stared at Feng Wu. Chapter 2055 Romantic Company 1. Chapter 2055 Romantic Company 1. Jun Linyuan stared at Feng Wu. "Didn't I tell you? Stop following me." Crossing her hands behind her back, Feng Wu looked around and said, "I'm not following you." Jun Linyuan smirked. "You're not? Then what are you doing now?" Feng Wu looked ahead and said, "I'm just savoring the view. I'm not following you." Jun Linyuan studied Feng Wu for about 3 seconds, but she just wouldn't meet his gaze. Jun Linyuan snorted and turned to walk away. As soon as he started walking, Feng Wu followed him. And she stopped when Jun Linyuan did. Jun Linyuan was speechless. "Feng Wu, do you find this amusing?" Jun Linyuan stared at Feng Wu. Feng Wu shrugged. "Huh, what do you mean?" Jun Linyuan rolled his eyes at her. While the two of them bantered back and forth, the others were astonished. Especially Granny Gong. Since when did His Royal Highness become so clingy? Has he finally understood his feelings? Granny Gong murmured to herself. She then looked to Feng Sun for affirmation. Feng Sun smiled bitterly and shook his head. Seeing the suspicious look in Granny Gong's eyes, he could only say, "I'm just worried that His Royal Highness is becoming too sentimental." Granny Gong said, "What do you mean?" Feng Sun shook his head. "To be honest, I'm as baffled as you are." After that, he quickly walked toward Jun Linyuan and Feng Wu. Granny Gong turned to Feng. "What's young Lord Feng getting at?" Feng said, "It's hard to say." Granny Gong looked at Feng in confusion. She usually had a clear head, but not today. Why was everyone so hard to understand today? But Feng wasn't going to give her an explanation. In fact, Feng was only guessing himself. At the farewell banquet, the night wind on the grassland was quite cool. The seats were arranged in a circle. Emperor Wu was given the host seat. On his left was the chieftain, and the Empress Dowager was on his right. Empress Dugu was further down the line. Before, she would have been displeased with the arrangement, but when she offended the Empress Dowager last time, Mrs. Dugu, her sister-in-law, had given her a few lessons. Ever since then, Empress Dugu had learned to say things to make the Empress Dowager happy. And so far, it had been quite effective. At least, the Empress Dowager didn't give her attitude whenever they met. Sometimes, when the old lady was happy, she could be quite nice to Empress Dugu. Jun Linyuan sat 1 seat further down next to Empress Dugu. Next to him was the second prince. As for Feng Wu, she was only a common princess, and was too far down to be seen. As before, Emperor Wu's people sat on the east side, while the people of the grasslands sat on the west. The banquet had already started when Jun Linyuan and Feng Wu arrived. A bonfire was burning in the center of the banquet, and everyone was smiling. Jun Linyuan frowned. He didn't like events like this, and had only come this way to frustrate Feng Wu. Chapter 2056, Romantic Company 2. Chapter 2056, Romantic Company 2. Therefore, Jun Linyuan immediately turned away from the crowd when he saw them. Of course, Feng Wu followed him because of her task. The two of them were going to walk away. But they had forgotten how eye-catching they were. When they showed up, the others were bound to notice them. Lord Mu was the first to spot them. Your Royal Highness. He quickly walked toward Jun Linyuan. His voice immediately attracted everyone's attention. Even the people who had been dancing stopped and looked in Feng Wu's direction. Look, it's the Crown Prince of the Jemwu Empire. He's so handsome. I hear that he's so powerful and has become a master cultivator at such a young age. Duga Mingxi gave Jun Linyuan a jealous glance. He had thought that only women of the Jemwu Empire would be infatuated with the Crown Prince. As it turned out, women of the grassland were the same. They were much louder, as if they were afraid that the Crown Prince couldn't hear them. Duga Mingxi looked in the second prince's direction involuntarily. As expected, the second prince's face was darker than a cloudy sky. Duga Mingxi sighed inwardly. Before the Crown Prince arrived, the second prince had been doing fine. He had engaged in a logical and cohesive debate with the older prince of the grassland. Everyone applauded him. The officials and teenagers of the grassland all sang his praises. But Duga Mingxi wondered why His Royal Highness had to come. As soon as he arrived, everyone else fell to the background, as if they were transparent. Standing there, he looked like a landmark that towered above everyone else. No one was even comparable with him. Duga Mingxi didn't know where to begin to vent his frustration. The Crown Prince was about as popular among men as Feng Wu was among women. Duga Mingxi was glad to see the two of them leave, but Lord Mu had quickly run to their side. He wanted to pat Jun Linyuan on the shoulder, but then he recalled that the Crown Prince was a neat freak. Lord Mu's hand stopped halfway and turned into an inviting gesture. Your Royal Highness, everyone's been waiting for you. Lord Mu was an extrovert, which was why Emperor Wu had made him in charge of the logistics. Jun Linyuan never compromised for anyone, and no one could affect him. Except for one person. He wanted to go, but he heard the Empress Dowager's voice at that moment. She arrived with Granny Lan and was asking, Is Junjun here? Is that you, Junjun? The Crown Prince was such a relentless and intimidating figure that it was so strange to hear someone calling him by his nickname. But if that someone was the Empress Dowager, the second prince's face had already darkened. Hearing the Empress Dowager's affectionate tone, he gritted his teeth. Chapter 2057, Romantic Company 3. Chapter 2057, Romantic Company 3. Seeing the Empress Dowager walking toward them, Feng Wu tugged Jun Linyuan's sleeve. Jun Linyuan threw her hand off. Feng Wu tugged his sleeve again. Jun Linyuan snorted. Seeing their interaction, Lord Mu had a strange look on his face. That wasn't right. According to Mu Yaoyao, the Crown Prince only treated Feng Wu as a toy, and would forget about her as soon as he was done with her. But judging by what was happening now, she wasn't any toy. It looked like she was quite dear to him. They looked like a happy young couple. Feng Wu was giving Jun Linyuan attitude, but His Royal Highness was patiently appeasing the girl. He tugged at the girl's sleeve, and she brushed him off. He tugged her sleeve again. How patient. Lord Mu had been a teenager once, so of course he could understand. They looked like all other loving young couples. He sighed inwardly. Mu Yaoyao, you little fool. Who were you trying to fool? His Royal Highness likes Feng Wu a lot. Despite his conflicted feelings, he had to smile. Feng Wu tugged at Jun Linyuan. Don't act like a baby. Her Majesty the Empress Dowager is here. Come with me. However, Jun Linyuan only glanced at her and turned to leave. Feng Wu was astonished. That left a bad impression on Lord Mu. He found Feng Wu so arrogant. Lord Mu stared at Feng Wu and was displeased. Who did this girl think she was? Unbelievable. However, at that moment, an idea suddenly struck Feng Wu. She noticed the arrogance in Jun Linyuan's demeanor. Every time she tried to give Jun Linyuan an order, he didn't react well. But when she softened her tone, most of the time he would oblige. Was that true? If that was the case, it meant that she knew how to manipulate Jun Linyuan. That thought made Feng Wu rejoice. Of course, she didn't let anything show. She took Jun Linyuan's hand and spoke in a pitiful tone. Are you really leaving me? Hearing this, Jun Linyuan immediately softened and stopped walking. It really worked. Feng Wu was so excited that she almost wanted to dance. Oh my, could she control Jun Lingyuan's temper now? Before, she only thought that she could bend Jun Lingyuan's will in this way. But she didn't know that it could be so effective. Will you come with me? Feng Wu was playing the role of Jun Lingyuan now, and she had been invited by both the Empress Dowager and Lord Mu. It would be so embarrassing if she left right now. Jun Lingyuan gave Feng Wu a meaningful look. And he didn't try to leave again. Feng Wu was singing inwardly. She was so happy to have learned more about Jun Lingyuan. By then, the Empress Dowager had reached Feng Wu, and everyone was looking in her direction. The Empress Dowager took Feng Wu's hand and said affectionately, Junjun, did you sleep well? Chapter 2058, Romantic Company 4. Chapter 2058, Romantic Company 4. Feng Wu immediately said, I'm well rested. Thank you, grandmother. You're always so formal. Why can't you be more casual around me? The Empress Dowager was happy to see Jun Lingyuan, and immediately took his hand. Come, sit with me. She then snorted. Someone was behaving like the smartest man in the room while you were away. He actually thought that he could win a debate. Humph. Feng Wu knew who she was talking about. Only the second prince would be criticized like this. The Empress Dowager then tried to lead Feng Wu away. She had no idea that the Jun Lingyuan she was talking to was actually Feng Wu. Feng Wu sighed inwardly. She could go with the Empress Dowager, but what if Jun Lingyuan wouldn't go with her? She was still on the 9th trial. Feng Wu looked eagerly at Jun Lingyuan. She already knew him a little better than before. She knew that she couldn't talk to Jun Lingyuan in a commanding tone, because he was a very rebellious teenager, and thought that he was the greatest man on earth. Therefore, she had to try to bend his will by using tricks, such as talking in a softer tone. It would work much better than trying to force him. As expected, when Feng Wu gave Jun Lingyuan a pleading look, he snorted. Feng Wu then walked up to him, and took his hand. Come, sit with us. She wished that she had a rope here to tie him to her waist. That way, she wouldn't have to worry about the 10-step distance anymore. The Crown Prince rolled his eyes at Feng Wu, and reluctantly followed her. But now, the crowd was utterly baffled. The Empress Dowager was the most astonished, because she was the closest to them. The two of them. How could her Junjun do this? Did they have no respect for her at all? The Empress Dowager's face darkened, but she couldn't bring herself to get mad at Jun Lingyuan. Therefore, she lashed out at Feng Wu. The Empress Dowager's eyes were as sharp as blades as she stared at Feng Wu. But what she didn't know was that her dear grandson was actually Feng Wu. You frivolous girl. Behave yourself. And you. The Empress Dowager gave her grandson a frustrated glance. Have you forgotten where you are? Where do you think you're taking her? Feng Wu's stomach turned. Gosh, the Empress Dowager was angry. Why? Feng Wu then saw that the old lady was staring at her, and Jun Lingyuan's clasped hands. Was that it? The Empress Dowager glanced at Empress Dugu. If she wasn't there, the Crown Prince would be sitting next to the old lady. But seniority came first. Empress Dugu was still the Crown Prince's titular mother, and even the Empress Dowager couldn't make Empress Dugu change her seat. Therefore, she just gave Empress Dugu a dirty look before she pulled Feng Wu away. Here, sit next to me. Let's chat. The second prince had had a great debate just then, and had impressed a lot of people. Therefore, the Empress Dowager wanted to show Jun Lingyuan some favor, so that some people wouldn't get the wrong idea. However, Feng Wu didn't care about that at all. She was only trying to finish the 9th trial. Chapter 2059, Romantic Company 5. Chapter 2059, Romantic Company 5. Therefore, when the Empress Dowager wanted to make Feng Wu sit next to her, Feng Wu kept looking back at Jun Lingyuan, fearing that he would be too far away from her. The Empress Dowager found that very frustrating. She pinched Feng Wu's waist and lowered her voice. Jun Lingyuan, have you lost your mind? That hurt. Feng Wu was almost in tears, and looked at the Empress Dowager in confusion. The Empress Dowager said angrily, Look around you. You're a man, you should act like one. Women are disposable. I see that you can't get that girl out of your head. I can have her killed. Fengwu didn't know what to say. She gave the Empress Dowager a strange look. If she really did that, she would kill her favorite grandson. Seeing how unperturbed Jun Linyuan looked, the Empress Dowager was even angrier. Jun Linyuan, are you trying to give me a heart attack? It seemed that she was genuinely angry now. Fengwu looked over her shoulder to calculate the distance. If she sat next to the Empress Dowager, and Jun Linyuan sat in the Crown Prince's seat, they wouldn't be over 10 steps apart. So, she decided to coax the old lady. And that was something she was good at. She took the Empress Dowager's hand, smiled and said softly, "Grandmother, you're an eagle who soars in the sky, and that girl is just an ant. An eagle would never let an ant bother her." The Empress Dowager seemed very pleased to hear that. Fengwu went on, "Grandmother, you're an adult, and she's just a kid. Why let her affect your mood?" The Empress Dowager looked away. What if I let her affect me? Fengwu sat down next to her and peeled an orange for her. Sure. Elderly people are just like children. In that sense, you're the same age as Fengwu and even younger than me. Jun Linyuan probably didn't know what his grandmother liked to hear, but Fengwu did. As expected, the Empress Dowager chuckled when she heard that. After that, the atmosphere seemed to lighten up a lot. However, the Empress Dowager wasn't going to forgive her grandson yet. Are you going to let the girl sit in your seat? The Empress Dowager stared at Fengwu. Fengwu cleared her throat. Grandmother, what do you mean? The Empress Dowager said. Isn't she a princess? She has her own seat. Tell her to go back there. Fengwu looked around. Where did the princesses sit? The seats were so far away, where she probably wouldn't be able to hear Jun Linyuan and the others talk. Fengwu said, Grandmother, if you insist, I'll have to sit with her. You. The Empress Dowager stared at Fengwu and was furious. Fengwu smiled and held the Empress Dowager's hands. There, Your Majesty, don't let her upset you. We'll ignore her. The Empress Dowager said, How can I? She's still sitting there. Does she think that she's the crown prince? Fengwu cleared her throat. Other people saw it as well. And some wanted to create trouble more than others. They were just waiting for the Empress Dowager to finish criticizing Fengwu. The second prince and Empress Dugu looked at each other, and both were pleased. Chapter 2060 Romantic Company 6. Chapter 2060 Romantic Company 6. The second prince and Empress Dugu looked at each other. They didn't expect that Jun Linyuan would become so foolish as to offend the Empress Dowager over a girl. Jun Linyuan was so proud and unapproachable that they thought he was going to quarrel with the Empress Dowager in public this time. Empress Dugu secretly rejoiced. Having spent years talking about Jun Linyuan behind his back, she had finally driven a wedge between the father and son. If Her Majesty the Empress Dowager abandoned Jun Linyuan as well, the second prince would have a much better chance. At that thought, Empress Dugu pricked up her ears and listened. But both she and other opponents of Jun Linyuan were disappointed. Jun Linyuan would never relent, but Fengwu was much more flexible. Fengwu took the Empress Dowager's hand with a smile and said, Of course. I'll tell her off when I go back. How about that? The Empress Dowager glanced at her grandson and asked, Why are you so docile today? Fengwu's stomach lurched. Had the Empress Dowager noticed something? Meanwhile, Jun Linyuan couldn't help but glance at Fengwu as well. He found the girl too naggy to sound like him. However, she had made the Empress Dowager very happy, so Jun Linyuan didn't say anything. He simply couldn't be bothered to do such things. Fengwu smiled at the Empress Dowager. Grandmother, don't you like me this way? The Empress Dowager snorted. I hope you mean it. I know you too well. You're a little outlaw out there. What can I do when your own father can't do anything? Emperor Wu walked over to them, glanced at his son, and asked the Empress Dowager, Did Jun Linyuan upset you again? Of course not. Although the Empress Dowager scolded Jun Linyuan, she wouldn't let Emperor Wu say a harsh word to her grandson. Junjun didn't do anything. Please don't tell him off. Emperor Wu rubbed his nose in embarrassment. Since the Empress Dowager had scolded him, he had to get back at his son for it. Therefore, Emperor Wu stared at Jun Linyuan with a dark face. Where have you been? Don't you know that there's a farewell party? Is this how you show your respect to the chieftain? Seeing that the Empress Dowager was going to retort, Empress Dugu rose from her seat and interjected with a smile. Your Majesty, please don't be mad. His Royal Highness must have had a tough time in the tombs, and it's only natural that he should need some more rest. We should be glad to see him. Emperor Wu said. He's not the only one who went into the tombs. Why is he the only one tired? Who does he think he is? He's not the emperor yet, and he's already behaving like one. That was a serious accusation. The second prince immediately interjected. Your Majesty, my brother is more capable and took more responsibility in the tombs. What hardship did he go through in the tombs? What responsibility? Tell me about it. Emperor Wu was genuinely angry. Seeing this, the Empress Dowager didn't know what to say. The second prince gave it some thought, and then smiled bitterly. Because my brother is much more capable than us, he didn't walk with us, so I really can't say. But he got Miss Feng Wu out, didn't he? Emperor Wu smirked. He didn't find the seed of the spirit source, nor did he save Wuxia. He only saved an outsider and won't acknowledge his faults. Jun Linyuan, you just won't repent, will you? Chapter 2061 Romantic Company 7. Chapter 2061 Romantic Company 7. Emperor Wu stared at Feng Wu. Do you still respect your father or not? Aren't they your brother and sister? Feng Wu looked at Emperor Wu in embarrassment. What was wrong with Emperor Wu? Had he forgotten where he was? The chieftain was still here. Why was he talking to Jun Linyuan like this in front of everyone? Emperor Wu stared at Jun Linyuan and said coldly, Answer me. Feng Wu had been about to make light of it at first, but now, she saw that she had to be more careful, since what she did might affect Jun Linyuan's position. She smiled and looked at Emperor Wu. Your Majesty, am I not your son? Emperor Wu snorted. Feng Wu chuckled. Since I'm your son, I don't think you should ask me if they're my brother and sister. You should ask Her Majesty the Empress. Emperor Wu almost choked. Jun Linyuan. Feng Wu smiled. What happened in the tombs was quite complicated. Your Majesty, if you want, I can tell you in detail, but you may want me to shut up because what my brother did was quite humiliating. Emperor Wu glared at Jun Linyuan and was furious. The second prince's stomach lurched. He had done some cowardly things in the tombs and submitted to Ranmil. That was something too shameful for him to admit. He gave Empress Dugu a meaningful look. Empress Dugu took the hint, walked to Emperor Wu, and held his arm. She then spoke in a soft, pleasant voice. Your Majesty, you're a father to all your vassals, and I know you spoke to His Royal Highness in such a manner because he's your son. I'm sure he doesn't mind, but we're still at a banquet now. She then turned to Jun Linyuan and scolded him. Your Royal Highness, you should know what His Majesty is like. You really need to apologize to your father now. Feng Wu wondered what Jun Linyuan would do in such a situation. At that thought, Feng Wu couldn't help but look at Jun Linyuan. But he was still happily eating grapes, and looked quite content now that someone else had to deal with his problem. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. Knowing how stubborn Jun Linyuan was, the Empress Dowager wouldn't let him apologize. So she stepped forward and cast a stern look at Emperor Wu. The banquet is about to start. Let's all go back to our seats and enjoy the farewell party. Just before the crowd scattered, Feng Wu sighed. I remember when my mother was still alive. Back then, Your Majesty would never question me like this. Then my mother passed away, and Your Majesty had Empress Dugu. After that, Your Majesty hardly ever visited me anymore. I was never properly taught, and now, I'm accused of having a bad temper. Yes, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have grown up like this without my father around. I'm the only one to be blamed for this. The crowd was about to scatter, but they all turned to look at Jun Linyuan. The Crown Prince was never big on expressing his feelings. He was known for his great cultivation achievements. But now, he looked so lonely that one couldn't help but feel sorry for him. Chapter 2062, Romantic Company, 8. Chapter 2062, Romantic Company, 8. Everyone was imagining a 3-year-old boy abandoned on a street corner. The real crown prince had been eating grapes, and almost choked when he heard this. She was doing it on purpose. That girl absolutely said those things on purpose. That was why she had given him that look just then. As Jun Lingyuan stared at Feng Wu, the others looked at her with different feelings. The Empress Dowager immediately broke into tears and went to hold Jun Lingyuan's hand. "My child, you've been through so much," she sounded heartbroken. Because Jun Lingyuan had never complained, when he showed a little emotion, other people would feel absolutely sorry for him. What the Empress Dowager said pretty much confirmed Feng Wu's earlier words. Empress Duga blushed. The Empress Dowager's words made her sound like a horrible stepmother. Although she couldn't wait to get rid of Jun Lingyuan, she would never. Everyone now looked at her suspiciously. Emperor Wu felt embarrassed as well. He glared at Jun Lingyuan and said, "What you said?" But the Empress Dowager yelled at him and cut him off. "Be quiet. Are you still going to blame Junjun?" Emperor Wu rubbed his nose. "Mother, I'm just..." The Empress Dowager was infuriated. "You just what? You've only been listening to your wife ever since you married her, and started ignoring Junjun since the birth of your second son. You're no different than any other father out there. You've been turned into a stepfather by your new wife. And you won't even admit what you've done. Instead, you're trying to blame everything on Junjun. Your Majesty, you're the role model for all your vassals. You should be a just ruler, not a biased father. Am I right?" Emperor Wu could only nod. "Yes, of course." The Empress Dowager smirked. "As long as I'm around, some people had better keep their ambitions to themselves. If you keep trying to take things that aren't supposed to be yours, I'll cut your fingers off." Empress Duga's face was scarlet red. Although the Empress Dowager didn't mention any names, everyone here knew whom she was referring to. Empress Dugu had been scolded by the Empress Dowager too many times to care. But what intimidated her was that Jun Lingyuan had changed his tactic. Wasn't he supposed to be stubborn to a fault? Since when did he learn to vent his grievances? If he had learned to do that, the emperor might listen to him. After all, he was a remarkable young man. At that thought, Empress Duga looked up at Emperor Wu. She was even more disappointed when she saw the sympathetic look on Emperor Wu's face. Mr. and Mrs. Duga looked at each other, and their faces darkened as well. If they didn't do anything, Jun Lingyuan would become their greatest obstacle. The atmosphere felt a little awkward. Just then, Chieftain Sinal stepped out with a chuckle. "Your Majesty, would you like to enjoy a performance?" Everyone looked at him. Chapter 2063, Romantic Company 9. Chapter 2063, Romantic Company 9. Why would he speak up during an awkward moment like this? Chieftain Sinal laughed. "Ranmil has just learned the ancient dance of Lulan. Your Majesty, would you like to see her performance?" Emperor Wu was very embarrassed, and had been looking for a way out. He took the offer without hesitation. Of course he said yes. He waved his hand and said, "Go ahead." "The ancient dance of Lulan? Is it the legendary one?" "Which one?" "Legend has it that Lulan has an amazing dance known as Fierce Face. It's supposed to be the hardest dance of the grassland, and only exists in legends. It's extremely simple, and about fierce conflict. At the same time, it also has a very gentle and feminine component. The dance is very demanding on the dancer's cultivation level and mental ability. The audience may feel enlightened and make a breakthrough. Do you think Princess Ranmil can do the Fierce Face dance?" "I don't think so. It's too demanding in so many aspects. If she hadn't lost her cultivation achievements, she may be able to do it. But she's only a spiritual grandmaster now. There's no way she can do that dance." "What a pity. If it really is Fierce Face, maybe we can make a breakthrough. If she can do it, she'll be such a treasure." "Do you know who was the first person to dance Fierce Face? Wasn't it Miss Yin Wu?" "Yes, she was later called Master Yin Wu. She had a real enchanting body. And she's the only one with that attribute so far. So stop hoping for impossible things." "An enchanting body? Feng Sun asked Xianyi in bewilderment. What's that? Why haven't I heard of it before? Xianyi's answer was concise. Sleep with her, and your cultivation will improve. Feng Sun asked. Does that ability even exist? Xianyi rolled his eyes at him. Only one such person existed in history, and she's passed away already. Feng Sun said. That makes sense. Otherwise, hardworking cultivators would be discouraged. That wouldn't be fair. So, what are they talking about? Xianyi said. They were discussing the dance the princess was going to perform. Feng Sun said. That's ridiculous. How does the dance have anything to do with the enchanting body? I can't stand these people. That's just too easy. Plus, isn't it an inappropriate thing for a princess to do? Just then they heard a man's voice. Let's welcome Princess Ranmil for the Fierce Face dance. What? Everyone was astonished. Fierce Face? It really is that dance? That's impossible. She's been reduced to a spiritual grandmaster already. Just then Ranmil came out. Everyone stared at her in wonder. Her dress was semi-transparent, and it floated in the wind in an enchanting manner. But that wasn't what everyone was looking at. They were focusing on her cultivation. Am I seeing this correctly? Feng Sun rubbed his eyes. She doesn't look like a spiritual grandmaster to me. Chapter 2064, Romantic Company 10. Chapter 2064, Romantic Company 10. Xianyi had just been looking at Ranmil, but hearing what Feng Sun said, he noticed it as well. He then frowned. Emperor Wu noticed as well, and gave the chieftain a confused look. The chieftain chuckled. Your Majesty, is it about my daughter's cultivation level? Emperor Wu said. Princess Ranmil doesn't look like a spiritual grandmaster to me. If I'm not mistaken, she's a spiritual lord again now. Ha ha ha. The chieftain was so satisfied that he laughed. Your Majesty, that's why my daughter insisted that she give us the Fierce Face dance. When everyone went back to get some rest just then, my daughter sat in the camp and cried. But as it turned out, it was a blessing in disguise. My girl's bad luck is finally over. She was suddenly enlightened, and learned the meaning of the Fierce Face dance. After she finished dancing, she went back to being a spiritual lord. What? Everyone was astonished to hear that. Ranmil had gotten her cultivation back, and it only took a dance to do it. Everyone looked at Ranmil, and felt as if she was glowing from head to toe. Ranmil was back to the way she was, and even more confident. Her lips were slightly parted, and her eyes were narrowed. She didn't look like the perfectly innocent girl anymore. Ranmil looked past the crowd and met Feng Wu's eyes with a smirk on her face, as if to say, thanks to you, I know this dance now. Everyone is a blessing to me, from the people that have helped me to the person that tried to set me up. Isn't there a saying in the Junwu Empire that one can only make achievements through hardship? So Miss Feng Wu, this dance is for you. Suddenly, Ranmil turned to look at Emperor Wu and asked, Your Majesty, would you like to make a bet with me? Really? Emperor Wu chuckled. What bet? Ranmil said. If my Fierce Face dance can keep a person here, will Your Majesty let that person stay? A person? Who? Ranmil smiled. It's a secret. Your Majesty will see. I just don't know if Your Majesty will be willing to part with that person. With all the remarkable teenagers in the Junwu Empire, Emperor Wu felt that he could spare one. So he nodded and said, Sure. If you have your eye on someone and he agrees to stay, I'll let him stay. Thank you, Your Majesty, the chieftain chimed in. Your Majesty, please keep your promise. Fearing that Emperor Wu would go back on his word, Ranmil immediately started dancing. The others weren't interested in the bet. They just glanced at Feng Wu from time to time. They wondered what she was thinking now. Earlier, she had destroyed Ranmil's cultivation in the tombs, but not only had Ranmil returned to her cultivation level, she had also learned the Fierce Face dance. Chapter 2065, Romantic Company 11. Chapter 2065, Romantic Company 11. So would Feng Wu feel regretful, get angry, or be scared? Everyone tried to find those emotions on Feng Wu's face, but it was impossible. The person using that body now was Jun Linyuan. The crown prince sat there and ate his meal, as if everything happening around them had nothing to do with him. He would glance at Feng Wu from time to time and wonder why the girl was still chatting happily with the Empress Dowager. One had to admit that Ranmil's fierce face was indeed an incredible dance. Halfway through, there was a buzzing sound in the crowd, and someone made a breakthrough. It was none other than Dugumingxi. I've made a breakthrough, but I didn't do anything. He was thrilled. Immediately, all eyes were on Dugumingxi. Dugumingxi was glad to make a breakthrough, but he was even happier to do things that could upset Feng Wu. So he decided to praise Ranmil. His cheeks were flushed with excitement, and he feigned a confused look as he looked around. I really didn't do anything. I was just watching the dance. Why did this happen? Dugumingxi, sit down. Stop showing off. We haven't sensed anything yet. Sit down, or we may lose the opportunity. The others were eager to watch the dance, and interrupted Dugumingxi. Dugumingxi gave Feng Wu a provoking glance. Just then someone else made a breakthrough as well. The crowd was excited again. At first, Fierce Face struck the audience as the most innocent dance, and Ranmil looked like a fairy in the moonlight. But halfway through, the dance became fierce, and the drumbeat was deafening. Because of that, the audience grew excited and was lost in the dance. In the second half, Ranmil began to take off her clothes, and the remaining pieces were almost see-through. As she danced, she moved closer and closer to Jun Linyuan, who was in fact Feng Wu. Feng Wu had been sitting with the Empress Dowager, but Jun Linyuan kept giving her dirty looks, so she made an excuse and went to sit with him. For that, the Empress Dowager kept glaring at Jun Linyuan. Ranmil had no idea that the person she was trying to seduce was a girl as well. Because of that, she tried her best to give Feng Wu alluring looks. That was an element of Fierce Face, and the most important part of the second half of the dance. Ranmil had only mastered that alluring look this afternoon. She kept winking at Jun Linyuan now. In fact, the Crown Prince was Ranmil's real target tonight. She had had her eye on him before she learned the dance. And now she had finally learned it. Moreover, she had one more card up her sleeve. Chapter 2066, Romantic Company 12. Chapter 2066, Romantic Company 12. Every man was enthralled by the dance. Ranmil moved closer to Feng Wu. Suddenly, she slipped and fell into Feng Wu's arms. Feng Wu was astonished. Jun Linyuan stared at her. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. Before Feng Wu could react, Ranmil had risen to her feet and moved away, as if what happened was only part of the dance. Feng Wu smelled her sleeve and noticed a unique scent. She smiled a little. The music stopped. Only then did the crowd come back to themselves and look at Ranmil in excitement. Bravo! What a wonderful dance! Amazing! Princess Ranmil is so beautiful. Everyone was praising Ranmil, but she didn't care about any of them. Her gaze was on Jun Linyuan the whole time, and his opinion was the only thing she cared about. But he gave no reaction, which made Ranmil uneasy. But she was used to taking the initiative, so she turned to Emperor Wu with a confident smile. Your Majesty, does our bet still count? Emperor Wu smiled. Of course it still counts. Now, which young man do you want to keep? Ranmil's fierce face would benefit whichever man she wanted to keep. Every young man looked eagerly at Ranmil. Pick me. She was beautiful and respectable, and she might dance fierce face for her man from time to time. All the teenagers looked forward to being picked. Ranmil looked past the crowd and fixed her gaze on Feng Wu. She then smiled. Your Royal Highness, do you want to stay here with me? What? Everyone gave Ranmil strange looks. That was bold. Jun Linyuan was the crown prince of the empire and the future emperor. Did she really think that he would stay behind for her? Although Ranmil was beautiful, she was still asking too much. Everyone shook their heads. That was never going to happen. Emperor Wu was surprised by that request as well. How could the princess choose Jun Linyuan? Feng Wu looked from Ranmil to Jun Linyuan. She asked him with her eyes. Do you want her? The crown prince glared at Feng Wu. He was very angry. Feng Wu cringed and took the hint. But other people had a different understanding of their interaction. Emperor Wu and the Empress Dowager saw that Feng Wu was staring at the crown prince and threatening him, and they were astonished. The Empress Dowager gritted her teeth. Junjun has spoiled that girl. This is outrageous. Granny Lan smiled bitterly. Your Majesty, please don't be mad. The Empress Dowager said. Of course I'm angry. I've never raised my voice at Junjun, but that girl is staring at him. Granny Lan said. Your Majesty, everyone has their own preference, and His Royal Highness. Chapter 2067, Romantic Company 13. Chapter 2067, Romantic Company 13. The Empress Dowager said, No, I won't allow it. I must break this girl. She must be tamed even if I have to break all her bones. Granny Lan sighed inwardly. No one paid much attention to their conversation. All eyes were on Jun Linyuan now. How would he respond to Ranmil's invitation? Feng Wu looked at Ranmil and smiled. The crown prince was smiling. Wasn't he supposed to be a cold, unapproachable man? Why was he smiling at Ranmil now? The crowd suddenly wasn't sure what he would say. Ranmil hadn't had much hope either, but she found a little now. Maybe it could actually happen. But what Feng Wu said next shattered all her hopes. I decline. She didn't even address Ranmil when she turned her down. Great. Many girls from the Jumwa Empire clenched their fists in excitement. The crown prince belonged to the empire, and was going to be the future emperor. Why would he stay in the grasslands to be Ranmil's husband? But Ranmil wasn't very disappointed, because she hadn't had much hope in the first place. She smiled and said, Since your Royal Highness won't stay here for me then. All eyes were on her. She smiled brightly. Then, will your Royal Highness take me with you? Wow. Everyone stared at her. They had heard that Ranmil liked the crown prince, and wanted to marry him. But they had never heard someone make such a straightforward request. Many girls gritted their teeth, and glared at Ranmil. How shameless. How could this woman say such a thing? Since everyone believed that Feng Wu was only the crown prince's maid, the girls could persuade themselves that the crown prince would eventually dump Feng Wu. But Ranmil was a princess of the grasslands, so the crown prince would have to make her an official member of his household. Feng Wu stared at Ranmil. For some unknown reason, she felt suffocated, as if someone was trying to steal what was hers away. She didn't like it. The crowd saw that Jun Linyuan was deep in thought, and began to speculate. Did His Royal Highness want to take Ranmil with him? Did His Royal Highness like Ranmil? Could it be? Feng Sang and the others all looked at Jun Linyuan nervously. Although they had all told themselves many times that they had to stop this delusion, they couldn't help it. Feng Wu didn't understand herself either. His Royal Highness was considering it. Ranmil was thrilled. His Royal Highness was patting his chest. He must be very serious about it. Chapter 2068, Romantic Company 14. Chapter 2068, Romantic Company 14. Ranmil believed that she had a good chance. Meanwhile, the crown prince stared at Feng Wu. Hey, yes, right. Feng Wu immediately woke up from her reverie, and looked at Ranmil. What did you say? Well, everyone looked at the crown prince, and was speechless. Ranmil had just confessed her love for him, but his attitude was such a humiliation to her. Ranmil paled a little. Feng Wu couldn't make the decision for Jun Linyuan, so she asked him, What do you think? Wow, the crown prince had just asked Feng Wu for her opinion. What did that mean? A short distance away, Master Dugu and Master Zhou looked at each other. They wondered if the crown prince was so displeased with Ranmil, or was it they who had failed to realize how important Feng Wu was to the crown prince. In a moment like this, he shouldn't be asking the opinion of a maid. Jun Linyuan snorted. Feng Wu asked, Do you want to take her or not? The crown prince snorted. Feng Wu said, So should I take her back to the imperial capital? Jun Linyuan glared at Feng Wu. Feng Wu said, So, I'll turn her down. Jun Linyuan said grumpily. It's your decision. Don't ask me. Feng Wu rubbed her forehead and wondered why the crown prince wouldn't make such a big decision himself. But it was enough to show that he didn't like Ranmil at all. So Feng Wu shook her head. When she was about to say no, Ranmil said something else. I have an enchanting body. Those words sounded like a thunderclap in everyone's ears. The enchanting body? Seriously? Princess Ranmil has an enchanting body. Gosh, that's such a treasure. But not everyone knew what that was. Feng Wu for one didn't. Thus, the people who knew showed off their knowledge. No wonder Princess Ranmil can learn the fierce face dance. She's like a living Miss Yen Wu. Come to think of it, she's not the reincarnation of Master Yen Wu, is she? Get to the point. What's an enchanting body? To put it in simple terms, if a man takes a woman with that attribute, every time they sleep together, he'll become a little stronger. So that is to say he doesn't need to do anything, and can enhance his power just like that. Yes. Holy shit. Earlier, they didn't think that the crown prince would take Ranmil. But now, they found it very possible. How could a girl with the enchanting body wander around? She had to join the royal household. The crown prince would have to be out of his mind to not accept the princess of the grassland. After hearing that explanation, Feng Wu felt a little crestfallen. She gave Jun Linyuan a glance and looked away. A moment later, she stole a glance at him again. After Ranmil mentioned her enchanting body, the crown prince remained unperturbed. His face was as emotionless as ever. But Ranmil was very confident in herself. That was the last card up her sleeve. She didn't believe that any man could resist that temptation. Chapter 2069, Romantic Company 15. Chapter 2069, Romantic Company 15. Jun Linyuan glanced at Feng Wu and asked her in return, What do you think? Feng Wu said, How am I supposed to know? The crown prince had just been appeased, but his face darkened, and he narrowed his eyes. There was a warning look in them. You don't know. Feng Wu was almost in tears. How am I supposed to know? She has that legendary enchanting body. All men are supposed to want her. The crown prince snorted but didn't say anything. Feng Wu didn't know what the man wanted. At the same time, Chieftain Sino rubbed his chin and smiled at Emperor Wu. Emperor Wu was also pleasantly surprised. The enchanting body. The princess really has that? Emperor Wu cried out. Both Empress Dugu and the second prince looked at her eagerly. The second prince wanted Ranmil as well. He wouldn't be so excited if Ranmil was only a pretty and smart girl, but now, he wanted to get stronger more than anything else. Only with enough power would he feel that he had enough dignity to face Jun Linyuan. The second prince gave Empress Dugu a pleading look. He wanted Ranmil. Empress Dugu shook her head at the second prince, hinting that he should wait patiently while she tried to find a way. The Empress Dowager didn't like Ranmil. She didn't like any girl that tried to throw themselves at her Junjun. But the girl could help men to cultivate even in bed. The Empress Dowager took Granny Lan's hand and said, Junjun has gone through so much for his cultivation. If he marries this Ranmil, will life become easier for him? Granny Lan didn't really understand this type of thing, but she still said, I think so, since everyone is so excited. The Empress Dowager clenched her fists. In that case, we'll take that Ranmil. Granny Lan immediately said, Your Majesty, please wait. The Empress Dowager looked at Granny Lan in confusion. Granny Lan smiled wryly. Your Majesty, after so many years, do you still not know what His Royal Highness is like? The Empress Dowager asked. What do you mean? Granny Lan said. His Royal Highness is a very proud man, and will never be forced into doing something. He only takes what he wants. No matter how suitable a girl is, if she throws herself at him, he'll never take her. The Empress Dowager realized that was indeed the case. But didn't Feng Wu throw herself at him? Granny Lan lowered her voice and said, Your Majesty, if you can put away your prejudice, do you really think that Miss Feng Wu is throwing herself at His Royal Highness? Or is it that His Royal Highness won't let her get away? The Empress Dowager was angry and stared at Granny Lan. Granny Lan immediately lowered her head. The Empress Dowager then turned to look at Jun Linyuan and Feng Wu. Although she hated to admit it, she had to admit that Granny Lan was right. The Crown Prince seemed to be the more eager one. But it only made her angrier. But why? Her Junjun was so talented and powerful. Why did he fall for such a girl? I won't have it. The Empress Dowager stared at Granny Lan. After we get back, write a letter to Firmament Palace and tell the daughter of the Zhou family to come back to the imperial capital. Chapter 2070 Romantic Company 16. Chapter 2070 Romantic Company 16. Granny Lan gave the Empress Dowager a look of resignation. Understood, the Empress Dowager said in a threatening tone. Granny Lan said, Yes, Your Majesty. Ranmil put her hands behind her back, raised her chin, and looked at Jun Linyuan confidently. Your Royal Highness, will you take me to the imperial capital? She then gave Feng Wu a provoking look. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. She wondered if Ranmil had a death wish. She had just tried to provoke Jun Linyuan. Jun Linyuan stared at Feng Wu with a threatening look in his eyes. Yes, it was obviously a threatening look. Alarmed, Ranmil gave Feng Wu an even colder look. Feng Wu didn't know what to do. It was supposed to be Jun Linyuan's problem, but she had to take care of it now. What an irresponsible man. Feng Wu snorted and told Ranmil, No, I won't. Wow, that was an outright refusal. There was nothing tactful about it. It was a straightforward no. Whoosh. Instead of looking at Jun Linyuan or Ranmil, everyone looked at Feng Wu. Especially the Zhou family and the Duga family, who held grudges against Feng Wu. They all stared at her in disbelief. No, this couldn't be happening. Before, although the Crown Prince would take Feng Wu everywhere, he pretty much ignored her and wouldn't say anything to defend her. But things had changed after they returned from the tombs. His Royal Highness had changed. Not only was he on Feng Wu's side, he also doted on her. He was the peerless Crown Prince. Many girls were heartbroken. The Zhou family and the Duga family were filled with despair. Especially the Zhou family. They had suffered a great loss this time. Both Zhou Qingyu and Zhou Qingxian were dead, and their parents blamed Feng Wu for everything. They seemed to have ignored Feng Wu until then, as if they had forgotten about their old grudges. But that was only because Feng Wu was already a dead person to them. But things had changed. Feng Wu alone was easy to handle, but if the Crown Prince was involved, things would become very complicated. Master Zhuo's face was very dark. He wasn't alone. Many people didn't look much better. Ranmil's face was livid. She clenched her fists and felt humiliated. That refusal had shattered her pride. All the eyes that were looking at her seemed to be filled with sneers and taunts, as if everyone was laughing at her. Had it been before, she would have cried and run away. But not today. Ranmil fought back the shame. She couldn't leave now. If she did, she would have to live with the shame forever. Therefore, she forced a smile. Your Royal Highness might have misunderstood me. Ranmil smiled. I hear that Miss Zhou Qinghuan is your Royal Highness's true love and the most suitable wife. As she spoke, she gave Feng Wu another taunting look. Chapter 2071 Romantic Company 17. Chapter 2071 Romantic Company 17. She then stared at Feng Wu and said, Therefore, I know I can't become your Royal Highness's future wife. I just want to be by your side, even if I'm just a maid or a slave. Your Royal Highness, please have some pity on me. She then knelt down. Gosh, everyone watched this in disbelief. OMG, Ranmil was willing to do that. Even the chieftain was astonished. He stared at Ranmil. With her enchanting body, only kings and emperors would be good enough to marry her, but although Jun Linyuan was the crown prince, Ranmil had just asked to be his maid or slave. Ranmil, the chieftain narrowed his eyes. Apparently, Ranmil hadn't told anyone about this. Everyone stared at Jun Linyuan in astonishment. Feng Wu was dumbfounded as well. She had no idea that Ranmil would be so stubborn. She was fixated on Jun Linyuan, like a dog holding on to a piece of meat. She would even abandon her pride as a princess. Feng Wu herself would never do such a thing, no matter how much she loved a man. She shook her head and shrugged at Jun Linyuan. What now? His Royal Highness was asking for Feng Wu's opinion. The crowd was once more astonished. Why was this happening? That enchanting body was a one-of-a-kind thing in the entire continent. Every man would love to sleep with her. But His Royal Highness was completely indifferent. Jun Linyuan looked back at Feng Wu with a threatening look in his eyes. Don't you know what to do? Feng Wu was crying inwardly as she shook her head at Jun Linyuan. It's your call. Jun Linyuan said. No, it's yours. Feng Wu said. If I make the choice, you better not regret it later. The Crown Prince smiled a little. If your choice displeases me, you'll be the one to regret it. Feng Wu said. Be reasonable, okay? Jun Linyuan said. No, I won't. Bite me. Feng Wu was astonished. The Crown Prince was very pleased to win the quarrel. Feng Wu knew what Jun Linyuan meant. He was such a proud person that he would never let people think that he had gained his cultivation achievements by sleeping with a woman. That would be such a humiliation. Therefore, Ranmil had lost the battle when she tried to use herself as a prize. But Feng Wu still found Ranmil very annoying. Even if she turned her down now, she could keep coming back. It was best for her to find a way to solve this problem once and for all. An idea suddenly struck her. She looked at Ranmil and said, Did you just say that you would become a slave or a maid just to be around me? Ranmil was relieved to hear that. It seemed that the reason the Crown Prince hadn't chosen her was because of Zhuo Qingwan. Zhuo Qingwan? Although she was known to be a genius, Ranmil wasn't intimidated. Chapter 2072 Romantic Company, 18. Chapter 2072 Romantic Company 18. She was very confident that once the Crown Prince slept with her and had a taste of her great body, he wouldn't want any other woman. So what if she started off as a maid? Eventually, she would become Jun Linyuan's only wife. Therefore, Ranmil said solemnly, Yes, that's what I said. Feng Wu nodded. I'm a suspicious person by nature. So if you want to serve me. She glanced at Feng. Given how smart Feng was, he immediately took the hint. He stepped forward and brought out pen, ink and paper for Ranmil. The others were all confused. What did His Royal Highness want to do? When Ranmil saw what was written on the paper, she stared at Jun Linyuan in disbelief. The chieftain realized that something was wrong, so he walked over to them and picked up the piece of paper. His face went scarlet red. His hands were shaking, and when he looked at Jun Linyuan, his eyes seemed to spit fire. This is outrageous. He glared at Jun Linyuan. Your Royal Highness, this is a humiliation. Feng Wu remained indifferent. It had been Jun Linyuan's idea, not hers. So, when the chieftain was angry, he was angry at Jun Linyuan, not her. Seeing that the Crown Prince showed no sign of changing his mind, the chieftain was furious. He quickly walked up to Emperor Wu and showed him the piece of paper. Your Majesty, please have a look. Many people craned their necks, trying to see what was written on it. Emperor Wu took one look, and his eyes widened. Jun Linyuan. He glared at his son. How dare you? Feng Wu felt the formidable energy of the emperor. Luckily, she was using Jun Linyuan's body now. Her own would have been crushed immediately. Feng Wu looked at Emperor Wu in confusion. Emperor Wu said, How dare you ask Princess Ranmil to sign this slave contract? What? A slave contract? For Princess Ranmil? That was indeed such a humiliation. Ranmil remained kneeling on the ground and looking docile. She had had everything planned out. But the last thing she expected was this contract. The maid or slave thing was only an excuse. She hadn't meant a word. Whoosh! All eyes were on Feng Wu. Everyone discussed it among themselves. Before, Princess Ranmil may have agreed to be His Royal Highness's maid. But she has an enchanting body now. That's a unique thing on this continent. Making her a maid is so. What will Princess Ranmil do? Will she sign it? Everyone hesitated. She had to choose between a position next to the Crown Prince and losing her dignity. Father, please give it to me. Ranmil gestured to the chieftain. Her father stared at her in disbelief. Chapter 2073, Romantic Company 19. Chapter 2073, Romantic Company 19. Ranmil. Father, please hand me the contract. Ranmil calmly rose to her feet. She didn't look like someone who had just been humiliated. Fengwu couldn't help but glance at her. How interesting. Fengwu had thought that Ranmil would never swallow the humiliation. However, not only did she take it, she did so with great composure. For that, Fengwu was impressed. Emperor Wu glared at Jun Linyuan. That's enough. Fengwu shrugged. Whatever you say, Your Majesty. She meant that she wouldn't take Ranmil anymore. Emperor Wu almost fainted. The chieftain gaped when he watched their interaction. Where was Emperor Wu's authority when he was with his son? The people of the Zhenwu Empire, on the other hand, were used to this, and didn't even raise their eyebrows. Without another word, Ranmil took the pen and ink from Feng, and the contract from her father. With 2 strokes, she signed her name. She gloated inwardly. So what if she was going to become a maid? Yes, she had to start from scratch, but she had an enchanting body. What was there to be afraid of? Legend was that the first Empress consort of the Zhenwu Empire also started off as a maid working in the imperial palace. Therefore, she wasn't worried at all. Feng gave her an indescribable look before giving the contract to Fengwu. Fengwu checked the signature. It was indeed Ranmil's name. Your Royal Highness, I'm yours now. Ranmil walked up to Fengwu and looked eagerly at her. Fengwu almost jumped. The meaning of that look was too apparent. Fengwu looked at Jun Linyuan. Jun Linyuan shrugged and played the happy onlooker. Fengwu stared at him and didn't like his attitude. She decided to let him solve his own problem. She then stuffed the contract into Jun Linyuan's hands. She was only throwing the ball back at Jun Linyuan. But in the eyes of the crowd and Ranmil, it was a very big deal. Your Royal Highness! Ranmil gritted her teeth and looked at Fengwu. Fengwu snorted. What? You got a problem? Ranmil gritted her teeth and fought back her anger. She forced a smile and said, I know I arrived later than Miss Fengwu. She has served Your Royal Highness for a while, so it's only natural that she's my superior. I have no objection at all. How docile. However, Fengwu didn't like her choice of words, which sounded like Fengwu really was Jun Linyuan's maid. She wouldn't have it. Normally, Fengwu couldn't do anything about it, but she was Jun Linyuan now, and she had the authority. Therefore, she put on a straight face and cast a stern look at Ranmil. What did you say? Ranmil was confused. Had she said something wrong? Fengwu flipped her sleeve and smirked. Miss Fengwu isn't my maid. Chapter 2074, Romantic Company 20. Chapter 2074, Romantic Company 20. The others didn't seem surprised. Since the Crown Prince cared for Miss Fengwu so much, of course she wasn't considered a maid. Ranmil didn't realize that, so she gritted her teeth and asked, Your Royal Highness, do you mean to marry her? No way. Fengwu wanted to smack Ranmil on the head. There was nothing between her and Jun Linyuan. They were strictly partners for a task. Although Jun Linyuan didn't know that yet. Fengwu stared at Ranmil and smirked. You ask too many questions as a maid. I don't want you around me. Fengwu glanced at Jun Linyuan and raised her chin. You can do whatever you want with her. She's yours. That actually made sense. Since Ranmil wanted Jun Linyuan, Fengwu decided to give Ranmil to him. But the crowd found it unacceptable. Ranmil was a princess. How could she be gifted away like a real maid? Why wouldn't Ranmil leave? To their disappointment, Ranmil still stood there. She bit her lower lip and showed no sign of leaving. Jun Linyuan took the contract and frowned. Just then, Feng Xin came out of nowhere. He patted Jun Linyuan's shoulder and said, Hey Xiaowu, are you so happy that you forgot how to speak? Poor Feng Xin. He had no idea that he was patting the shoulder of his boss Jun. If he had known, he would never have done such a thing. Jun Linyuan looked at Feng Xin. His eyes were so black that they looked like bottomless lakes, but at the same time, they glinted like sword blades. Feng Sun jumped. He felt as if a sword had just punctured a hole in his chest. Without knowing it, he moved his hand away from her shoulder and said gingerly, "Xiao Wu." But before he could say anything, Jun Linyuan put the contract in his hands. Huh? Feng Sun was confused. Feng Wu said indifferently, "Didn't you say that I didn't give you a birthday gift this year? She's yours." Just like that, the crown prince handed the trouble over to someone else. Everyone drew in their breaths, including Feng Sun. Seriously? Feng Wu had just... Feng Wu, how dare you? The older prince bellowed. His sister wasn't an object. They couldn't pass her around like that. The crown prince would only talk to the people he wanted to. So he ignored the prince and looked at Feng Sun. Feng Sun scratched his head and looked perplexed. Did I tell you that? I thought I told only Boss Jun about it. How did you know? Feng Wu's stomach sank, and she glared at Jun Linyuan. She didn't expect that he would say such a stupid thing. The crown prince almost blushed under her stare. Before he could say anything, Feng Sun found an excuse for him. He stared at Feng Wu. Boss Jun, that wasn't very nice. Feng Wu looked perplexed. Feng Sun said, "Why did you tell Xiao Wu about it? Are you that close now?" Feng Wu didn't know what to say. Chapter 2075, Romantic Company, 21. Chapter 2075, Romantic Company, 21. Feng Wu didn't know what to say, so she remained silent and kept her face as Jun Linyuan-like as possible. The others read her silence as acquiescence. So were His Royal Highness and Feng Wu really that close? The older prince of the grassland ran to Feng Wu's side and yelled, "Your Royal Highness, although the Sino grassland is a vassal of the Zhenwu Empire, we still have our dignity. This is outrageous." He tried to make it sound like a conflict between the two forces. Everyone here was in the political circle and was sensitive to such things. Therefore, they immediately saw what the prince was trying to do. Lord Mu interjected, "Your Highness, I have to protest. When Princess Ranmil signed the contract, did she sign it as a princess?" Lord Mu was an experienced politician and got straight to the heart of the matter. If Princess Ranmil really had thought of herself as a princess, then she had brought the humiliation on herself. If she hadn't thought of herself as a princess when she signed her name, then why was the prince bringing it up? Was he trying to stir up something? Those words immediately rendered the older prince speechless. Feng Wu couldn't help but glance at Lord Mu. She hadn't expected Mu Yaoyao's father to be rather capable in that sense. Lord Mu gave Feng Wu an obsequious smile. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. Back then, even Mu Yaoyao had been so arrogant toward her, but now, Mu Yaoyao's father was trying to fawn on her. How incredible! The older prince stared at Feng Wu. Even if that's the case, Your Royal Highness still didn't show my sister any respect. Feng Wu smiled. Did I force her to sign it? The older prince was speechless. Feng Wu said, "Since she signed her name, she's my maid now, and I can give her to whomever I want. Do you have a problem with that?" The older prince didn't know what to say. Feng Wu said, "You should keep me in your prayers. I may give her to the emperor one day. That'll be a treat for your family." The older prince didn't know what to say. Emperor Wu stared at Feng Wu, and his hands shook with anger. What a defiant son. Ranmil looked up, and her eyes were filled with sadness, rage, and humiliation. She had no idea how things had turned out like this. She had made one compromise after another, but in the end, she was completely humiliated. Ranmil only now realized that the crown prince didn't like her at all. He had no feelings for her whatsoever. Ranmil couldn't take it anymore. She burst into tears and ran away. Seeing her run away, everyone reacted differently. Some sighed, some felt sympathetic, and some were sorry for her. But most of them looked at Feng Wu in amazement. Of course, they thought that they were looking at Jun Linyuan. Why did they look so impressed? Feng Wu was perplexed. After the banquet was over, Feng Wu asked Jun Linyuan, "Shouldn't people accuse me of doing that to Ranmil? Why was there admiration in their eyes?" Chapter 2076, Romantic Company, 22. Chapter 2076, Romantic Company, 22. Jun Linyuan said, "Of course they admire you." Fengwu asked, "Why?" Jun Linyuan said, "Most men are like that. They like getting a free lunch. But they don't want to hear people say that they were helped by a woman. Therefore, after such an opportunity popped up, they admire me for being able to say no." Fengwu's eyes twinkled. "But why did you turn her down? She can save you a lot of effort." Jun Linyuan snickered. "Sleeping with someone you don't like is like stepping into a toilet. I can't do it." Fengwu said, "Hey, Your Royal Highness, that's so gross." Jun Linyuan said, "Because it is." Fengwu said, "Are you saying that Ranmil is gross?" Jun Linyuan said, "Am I wrong?" Fengwu said, "But they all think that she's gentle, beautiful, and has a pure heart." Jun Linyuan glanced at her. "That's because they're all blind." Fengwu looked perplexed. The Crown Prince crossed his hands behind his back and said, "No, it's not that." Fengwu looked perplexed. He said, "They have no eyes." Fengwu chuckled and gave Jun Linyuan a little shove. "Hey, you shouldn't say such a thing about a girl." The Crown Prince glanced at Fengwu. "Why are you so happy about what I said?" Fengwu said, "Well." The Crown Prince looked her up and down. Fengwu stared back at him. "What?" Jun Linyuan said, "Fengwu." Fengwu said, "Speak." The Crown Prince suddenly smiled and said, "Exactly how much do you like me? It's impossible to hide it." Fengwu threw a dirty look at him. "No, I don't like you." The Crown Prince raised his chin. "I see." Fengwu stomped her foot and stressed, "I mean it. I don't." The Crown Prince smiled a little. "All right." Fengwu said, "Why are you smiling?" The Crown Prince said, "You look nice when you lie." Fengwu said, "I'm being serious. Didn't you hear what I said?" "I don't." The Crown Prince scratched his ear. Yes, I heard you. You don't like me." Fengwu said, "But you don't seem angry at all." The Crown Prince asked, "Why should I be angry?" The Crown Prince had figured it out by now. He believed that the girl would never admit her true feelings. Despite how much she liked him, she always stressed that she didn't like him. However, she had been doing everything to be around him. What a girl. Fengwu didn't know what to say. Jun Linyuan used to lose his temper whenever she told him that she didn't like him. But why wasn't he like that now? Fengwu said, "All right. That's even better." The Crown Prince suddenly chuckled. Fengwu stared at him. "Why are you laughing again?" The Crown Prince crossed his hands behind his back and said, "I'm not telling you." Fengwu replied in the same tone, "I don't want to know either." The Crown Prince said, "I won't tell you then." Fengwu stole a glance at Jun Linyuan and wondered if that meant that he actually wanted to tell her. A thought then struck her. The 9th trial. The two of them had to stay within 10 steps of each other for a month. The thought gave Fengwu a headache. Chapter 2077, Untitled. Chapter 2077, Untitled. But to save her beautiful master, no matter how hard it was, she would do it. At that thought, she told Jun Linyuan, "Let's get back to where we left off before the banquet." Jun Linyuan asked, "Where was that?" Fengwu said, "What do you think about the game?" Jun Linyuan chuckled and looked very pleased. What had he just said? Although the girl talked about not liking him all the time, all she ever did was stay close to him. Now she didn't want to part with him. And she called it a game. Jun Linyuan smiled at Fengwu and felt over the moon. But he said, "No, I don't want to play it." Fengwu was astonished. While Fengwu and Jun Linyuan were bantering, things were quite different for the people of the grassland. After Ranmil burst into tears, she went back to her tent. Qingqiao, her maid, was very worried, but there was nothing she could do. "Princess, please don't cry. If the Crown Prince doesn't want you, it's his loss. He must be blind." Qingqiao was always on her princess's side. "How could he humiliate me like that?" Ranmil wept. "Princess, I won't have it. I won't." Ranmil clenched her fists and shouted. Suddenly, Qingqiao fell to the ground. Ranmil's eyes widened. "Qingqiao, A man in a black robe suddenly appeared behind Qingqiao. He stood in the shadows, and a long hood covered most of his face. There was a mask on the part of the face that wasn't covered, and one could only see the smooth skin of his chin. Seeing him, Ranmil jumped to her feet. "Why are you still here?" Ranmil was alarmed by the man. He just stood there and stared at Ranmil. He didn't say a word, but the energy he gave off made one shudder. If Feng Wu were here, she would be alarmed as well, because this man was no less intimidating than Jun Linyuan. Apparently, Ranmil already knew this man. "You failed." The man stated the truth. Ranmil snapped. "No, I haven't. It's not finished yet. I didn't fail. I didn't." The man smirked. Ranmil stared at him. "Do you think that I failed?" The man said. "You humiliated yourself at the banquet." Ranmil stared at him. The man snorted. "I didn't teach you that dance so that you could do such a thing." Ranmil gritted her teeth. The man said, "You took the bet. It's time to admit your defeat." Ranmil gritted her teeth. "Please give me another chance." The man shook his head. "You won't succeed." Ranmil dropped to her knees. "Please give me another chance." The man didn't say a word. Ranmil insisted. Please give me one last chance. If I fail again, I'll give up Jun Linyuan. I'll do anything you want. Please." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.